Had to flick the switch.
Doing surgery.
You are?
I think so, yeah.
Wow.
I have one more appointment to figure it out.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, January 13th. Before we get started, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Chair, would you lead?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On the agenda for tonight, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, reading of mail organization, followed by department board updates, Littleton Water Department, and, October 28th special town meeting, the home rule petition we're going to be talking about and get that finalized, and amendment to the Mass Works grant, authorizing the town administrator to sign. At 6:50, we'll have input from the public and members. 7 o'clock, public hearing, Fallon's Wine and Spirits liquor license to consider cancellation under Mass General Law 138, Section 77. 7:20, approved revised application for transfer of all alcohol license from Matui Patel and David Incorporated, doing business as Chip Shots, to CAD, doing business as Chip Shots, Christine M. Ferrante. That's followed by a host agreement, negotiations with proposed marijuana facilities. Around 7:40, tax increment financing for a new hotel at the Point, and we might consider going through that one tonight. I'm still working on that. 8, continuation of public hearing pursuant to Selectmen's regulations and policies on earth removal on Spectacle Pond Road. 8:15, boards and committees with annual budgets.
Without annual vote? Says without annual.
8:30, Church Meadows request for proposals. 8:45, committee vacancies, Common Revitalization Committee, Economic Development Committee change charge. 9 o'clock, response to letter from Town of Needham having to do with zoning and 2/3 majority requirement. And at the end, we have Town Administrator Annual Report Timeline, Annual Report Cover and Dedication, Community Impact Grants, Northeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, NEMLAC, I guess that's what it is. Get that agreement signed. And finally, Elder and Human Services gift donations from the Borough's Charitable Foundation and the Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Foundation, and minutes. Mail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have in the packet a $5,000 grant that was secured by the Elder and Human Services Department for dementia-friendly initiatives from Emerson Hospital, and a $1,000 grant secured by EHS on mindful movement, so good job to EHS. Also, we have a notice from the Park and Recreation and Community Education Department regarding their holiday helpers and the fact that they helped 22 families, 40 kids in total, which is also good job. I'm sure the board, I received a number of comments from the board when that information circulated. Letter from the Mass Historical Commission regarding Massachusetts preservation projects, specifically a funding opportunity. A required letter to the ABCC, which we sent in our office on behalf of the board, the annual report on alcohol license revenue collected by the town. A letter by Mass DOT regarding supplemental allocation of just about $39,500 additional, making a total of $434,000 roughly for fiscal 19 from the state regarding Chapter 90 funding. And then a letter from the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture regarding their launch of their APR, the Agricultural Preservation Review meetings this year. That's it.
Okay. Moving on to number 2, we welcome from the Water Department, the Chairman, Mr. Carr, and from the Water Department itself, Kevin Hunt. Hopefully we can get this finalized in the agreement.
That'd be awesome, Mr. Chair.
I think we've all gone through all the red lines that were there. Is there any statements you want to make?
Nope, I just want to make one point in regards to it, is that Chairman Knox, myself, and Town Council had a conference call after town meeting and before the November 25th letter from him, and that's what really generated that letter. So we had our input into it, and then staff kind of took that and developed the information we sent out to Nina, which is the letter, the red line, along with the home rule petition. That's all.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, please.
Okay, I just want to, I brought this up before, and I'm completely supportive of what the water commissioners are looking to do here and the changes therein. One of the changes, though, does address an item I think is important, and I understand fully with the transition both to the water department and transition to a new engineering firm that it hasn't been addressed yet internally, but it should be, and that's how the process for expanding the district impacts the formula for developing both betterments and the actual rates that are charged. I believe my recollection with Kent from the prior Weston and Sampson engineering group indicated that some of that was a product of regulation, so I think we need to be mindful that we're, if we're adopting a strategy where the district grows, and I'm fully supportive of that, that we make sure we're doing it properly, because it affects billing and everything else and legality. So as long as that it's understood that that's going to be addressed sometime between now and whenever you get around to the business of expanding, then we, other than that, I'm wholly supportive.
Absolutely. I mean, if I may, Mr. Chair, I know Nick met with the finance team to go over that transition into the new contractor.
Yeah.
And part of that transition, now that we have the money source in place, will be exactly what you're talking about, Paul.
Thank you. Good luck.
That's already in motion.
Good. Any other comments on the document?
And I think as far as the blank is concerned in the proposed motion, it definitely can insert the words water commissioners.
I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to concur with the interpretation by the Water Commissioners that the intent of town meeting was to allow the Board of Commissioners to expand the sewer district without town meeting approval, remove the words "and approval by town meeting" from section 1 of the petition, to sign the proposed transmittal letter, and file the home rule petition with Senator Eldridge and Representative Arciero.
Second. Motion been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Second part of the Mass Work grant?
Fairly housekeeping matter, but I understand that the water commissioners, through the work of the Light and Water General Manager, yes, Nick Lawler, have revised the MassWorks grant to specifically discuss the discharge site as opposed to the entire scope of the project, and work with them on timelines. So at this point, I think it's fairly administrative. The entire packet for the grant revisions was in the packet. Assuming no questions by the board, I'm just looking for authorization to sign.
And to reiterate, MassWorks and the administrations,
They love this.
administrators bless
They
this.
love
right?
it. They love it. They like this more than, because now it's specific to one area, and it's one site, and they can see the progress of the project being complete for this $1.5 million grant.
It also means that we can complete this and say, whoa, we're done with that piece. Any more?
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
Motion is
good. I will, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize the town administrator to sign the amendment to the MassWorks grant.
Second.
motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very
Anything you
much.
want to say, Kev?
Nope, Jim had it covered, but I gave her.
While you guys are here, one thing I do want to mention that came up in our last sewer meeting is that, strictly speaking, the town holds the authorization for the money to do the design, whereas the water commissioners are now the ones actually overseeing and implementing it with the water department. So for the interim, essentially until we transfer over that money to their responsibility, even though they're responsible for the project, the authorizations for expenditures will actually be routed through us. But I would think at some point in time, if we've given them all of the other responsibilities, it might make sense to give them the responsibility to or the ability to spend the money as well, so. Just an administrative thing that's mostly a headache for Nina.
So you have to come back.
That's fine, that's fine. So long as you keep saying, yes, no problem, and sign that docket, we're good.
And the initial expenditure out of that for some of the design services with CDM is.
38.5.
Great.
That's what I was speaking of earlier, that the finance team
They,
worked it out.
they actually jumped right into it. We signed that contract last Monday, and they'll have a report for us for this Thursday's meeting, just kind of updating on where we are. And the current duration for that is about 45 days. So we should have, mid-February, have some feedback on their peer review, value engineering so far on the work to date, and begin moving this forward.
Step one,
Yeah,
step
exactly.
one.
Great.
So, we appreciate all the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
LSU, baby, LSU.
Mr. Sanders?
I'm rooting for the Tigers.
Mr. Chairman, are we talking about the amount of money that has been approved already to give over to them, which is the 3 million?
2.2.
Plus the other, so we're talking about just that amount of money, and the money, are we talking about for the site as well?
I guess strictly speaking, the money for the site is also our responsibility
I
right
think,
now.
but part of town meeting, it was specifically, because the first vote was
That's right.
for us to transfer the power to us.
So from that point forward, you guys are already getting money, right?
Correct, so I don't think that has to go through you guys.
I think that's something for us to work out, George. I don't know the specifics of it, but certainly right now, everybody's playing nice in the same sandbox. so.
Absolutely.
Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Public input, anybody? If not, we'll go. Mr. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask about this board/committees without annual budget. I talked to the chair of the finance committee a few nights ago there, and he said that professional disability had a line item on there, but when I went and looked at the package there under that item, I didn't see the disability commission being listed there under the boards/committees without annual budget. And I think what we had talked about was $1,200 for the annual budget. So I just want to know, are we included in this? Because this has been an ongoing running thing for, I guess, going on 3 years. No budget.
1,200.
We're gonna get that, coming up anyway, so you get your answers in.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Any members' input?
Already been accounted for,
Jeez.
in which case it wouldn't be a board without a budget.
Any-
Certainly, so I wanted to broach with the board as a whole the subject of changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to a Select Board. And I just wanted to see if we can maybe agenda this for a more in-depth discussion at a future time. But it's something that I've been thinking about, and I know a few other members of the board have also mentioned this to me, and I'm bringing this up, and I don't want it to be because I'm the only woman on the Board of Selectmen. I really would hope that it could be a discussion and a decision that we can make as a board, as a whole. A lot of communities around us are converting the name from Board of Selectmen to a Select Board. It's more inclusive, it's more progressive, and I think it really reflects more of the community of Littleton as a whole. We are an inclusive community, we are a progressive community. We have a lot of women now serving at top-level management positions in our town. We have a lot of women serving on the boards of committees that we appoint. We're the only board in Littleton that's gender-specific. So it was just something that I wanted to bring up to you and see if you could consider it and think about it. Maybe we can table it for further discussion in another meeting.
That's fine. You'll certainly get discussion
Okay.
from me. Anything else?
No?
Sure. No. Well, go. Oh, this is really good.
What,
There's a lot of games on tonight.
what's the process, if we, just at a very, very high level? to
I
make
believe
that
the
change?
town would need to, I believe the board would need to go to town meeting and seek a home rule petition.
Home rule
to-
petition.
yeah. But I will double check on that.
Is it possible it could be as simple as just changing the language anywhere it appears in a town bylaw and leaving the state alone? I mean, that's an option too.
I think
mean,
that's an option, certainly. I
I
don't
wouldn't
know
be
if that
surprised
would
if the
be.
state already allows for either interpretation without, I wonder whether every town that's made this change has gone to the state for it, or whether they just change it internally and it's
Well,
accounted for.
a former community that I worked in decided to change it internally
Yeah.
and not go to that level, so I think
Right.
that's a choice of the town.
Yeah.
But I will double check on that. Certainly, if we made that change, we'd also, of course, want to make the change to the bylaws.
Right.
As you mentioned. When would the board like this item to come back? At least, so I can check
I
back
say
and
after MMA,
confirm?
I'd like to try to talk to some of our colleagues at MMA. So probably in February.
June.
Well, in
When's
case,
Joe
in
up
case
to?
it involves a bylaw, we probably should do it, before the deadline passes for any
Right,
town meeting
right.
action.
So,
But there's a
comfortable
lot of
with
discussion
February?
has to go around it, because
Yeah.
there's any number of other names have been, Town of Wakefield calls them the town council. I mean, there's different,
Yeah, ordinarily, town council is established by an actual charter.
charter, right?
So I don't, with the absence of a charter in Littleton, that's why I believe we need to go to a home rule petition. But again, I'd like to
That's,
double
that's,
check
I
on
mean,
that.
I don't know, so I want to do the research to
Sure.
find out what the deal is.
Okay. So is there a general consensus for February?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sounds good.
You want to like my June idea?
I'm okay with June.
No.
I don't see it as offensive, I just see it as, not tradition, but kind of legacy, it's congressman or waiter, actor, so there's different industries where, I don't know.
We can put it on the agenda and talk about it.
I
Yeah.
think that's the one to do.
Okay. Since we have 7 minutes to go for a public hearing, anything we want to jump to?
Well, we can definitely go to the ABCC revised application for the,
Chip shots.
thank you, chip shots.
So item number 5?
Yes.
I looked through that and didn't notice, you're about to tell us, aren't you? What is the change?
There were 4 different changes, and basically, they appear to all be administrative and relate to the filing by the applicant or the applicant's attorney more than any, I don't see any relationship to the parameters that the board voted. So I didn't feel that a hearing would be necessary for this item, but we are following the ABCC's language on their recommendation by the investigator, which indicates that it must be forwarded to the Littleton Licensing Board, and then the Littleton Licensing Board must approve before the documents are forwarded to the ABCC for reconsideration. So there were specifically 4 things, and I attempted to highlight those items that were changed in the packet. And let me just get to that point.
They're under the investigative comments,
Yes. Yeah, so I highlighted the lines that were changed. For instance, and it blacked out. That's ironic. In the version I'm looking at, and perhaps the version you're
What
looking at.
page?
You got it too.
80, well,
The pages are, is that the bottom of the page?
well, that's a
Page
different.
right after the
page one
number
of the
5
application
Oh,
transfer.
all right, get you, all right.
This is the first change, the business entity information.
Yeah, all right.
Unfortunately, what I highlighted, which showed up as highlighting on my screen, appears to have almost redacted on the screen that I'm looking
Not
at.
almost.
Completely redacted, fair point. And that was not intentional, but essentially, those areas were the ones that were incorrect, that were changed on the revised application.
I'll find it, it's in here somewhere.
Yeah, so it's got the station on the top.
Yep.
Doesn't look like it's on this side. This is all,
So, I mean, none of it seems germane to the decision that we
It doesn't
came to,
appear
so
germane at all.
I don't know that it's necessary for us to deliberate any further than that. It's just, to your point, I think some of it was, to determine that Cindy's a sick, putting Carla's name instead of Kristen's name as the, yeah, it's all stuff that the attorney just filled in incorrectly and has changed that. Proof of mortgage, things like that.
Right, right, degree of ownership.
Right.
All right, it has nothing to do with location, hours,
Nothing
what kind
relevant
of
to
service
us.
they're providing, the things that.
We might deliberate
Look
about. Yeah. So I'm comfortable with us moving forward without further deliberation. Let's do it quickly before the attorney gets in the room and starts charging the client. George's question.
You ready for a motion, Joe?
I think George is.
Well, probably ought to let him, in case there's something he wants to add to it. Yeah.
We're on the topic now if you want to.
Well, that'd be great. I'm sorry, I just walked in.
We took it up a little earlier, isn't it? We had a small opening.
You can be forgiven for thinking we might run behind you, Joe.
You're running ahead, that's awesome. It was just a little hiccup, whoops. Some of the paperwork was a little deficient, so we corrected it, checked it with the ABCC, so it should all be in order. It was mostly a little problem with the first page of the application, and they had a question about the financing. They needed additional documentation, but everything is fine.
I think we're all set for motion.
Yep.
I move that the Board of Selectmen reconsider the application and vote to approve the request to the transfer from Rudy Patel and Dave Incorporated doing
I'm
business.
sorry, I modified it slightly. I apologize.
Move that the Board of, this is not motion, I'll move that the Board of Selectmen reconsider the application and vote to approve the submitted revised application which requests the transfer from Maruti Patel and Dave Incorporated doing business as Chip Shots Pub, Nikita H. Patel, current license manager, to transferee KAD Incorporated doing business as Chip Shots, Kristen M. Ferranti as proposed license manager for the premises located at 245 Air Road, Littleton, Mass. 01460. The hours of operation of 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday through Sunday pursuant to MGL Chapter 138, Section 12, for transfer of an all-alcohol restaurant license.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you very much.
You did a great
Well done,
job.
Counselor.
I don't care what anyone says
We'll
about
tell
it.
the Ferrantis you were here for hours.
Mr. Sanders, you have something to do with this?
I had a question on the motion. Where's the town at with the relook on the fees for the applications? You were supposed to been, having a look.
We said we want to put that on the future. We never committed to doing that. We said we need to take a look at that down the road, and we're not that far down the road yet.
And there's a lot of fees that the town needs to look at, not just the all alcohol one. I think,
Common fare,
across the
yeah.
board, there's a number. And so we wanted to do that comprehensively rather than on a license by
I think
license.
you need to put it on the agenda to have it done, because if you don't, the town is losing money if we are lower than other communities around here for the same type of service that they're providing in their community.
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
Just collecting papers over here.
Perfect, that's awesome, thank you.
Okay, right on time. We have a public hearing. Is there something that has to be read for this?
Yes. Mostly, we don't have an actual newspaper notice, which we usually move or waive, read or waive, but we do have a recommendation to open the hearing.
Okay. I'll move to open the hearing for consideration of cancellation of Udacho Incorporated's doing business as Fallon's Wine and Spirits liquor license under MGL Chapter 138, Section 77.
Move made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You want to come up? Sir, how you doing?
Good.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I miss going in the store. We just want an update because.
I understand. I already, was talking to Nina prior to this meeting, so she gave me heads up what's going to come up in that meeting, what kind of question he would ask us. As I said before, we cut off the bat completely by not able to transfer a license from one location to another for the buyer. that will set us back a little bit of time to figure out how we can regroup and what we're gonna do. As a current location right now, the landlord selling the building is for sale. The couple parties who interested in buying the building didn't show much interest to have a license, to have a business in that location. We currently have a lease with a landlord, but if that deal will go through, we need to find a different location. Also, since this business was from '84 and they put refrigeration and all that, it's old school refrigeration, our compressors are down right now completely. We found only one shop in Ohio who's still doing this Dayton compressors. Otherwise, everything needs to be refitted, redone to the new system, which is a lot of money. We sent one compressor to Ohio to see if they can refurbish for us, so we can bring it back and we can restart at least one refrigeration system. There's 3 different compressors running the 3 different cooling systems. So that's kind of hefty, and I need to know where I'm right now. If we're gonna move the license somewhere else, I'm gonna find a different location in town of Littleton, which is very hard, it's not easy. We have only one stretch of the road between Dunkin' Donuts and the Littleton Common, when the 99% of the business is located, pretty much. And it's very hard to find something on that road. I thought, my impression was the former 7-Eleven will be the great fit for this license, since they already have a beer and wine in place. But that deal didn't go through. So I'm asking for a little bit more time to figure out what I'm gonna do with the store. As you guys know, the store was in operation under our management for 14 years. There was no complaint or anything mishap in our location for all these years, and we proudly serve our community. Like I said, it just caught off guard, and we just need to figure out what's the vision for that store would be next.
Understand one thing, we have no complaints about
Right.
the way you run the store.
Right.
Our only thing is, we want to grant you the 6 months.
By the law, by
Yep.
the state law, I understand, I'm just asking what we need to do right now. Find a buyer to buy the license itself without the business and move somewhere else if they find a location, or we're gonna move our license as a store somewhere if we can find something, like I said, on that stretch of a road between Littleton Common and the Dunkin' Donuts. Anywhere else, I don't know if there's any possibility to run the business. Everything else, it's just everybody want to be on this stretch.
Yeah, I might be just speaking for myself, but because we're a small town,
Right.
the licenses we have are few in number, and I think it's fair to say those that we award, we want to see them being used, because there's only it's a way of serving the public in different parts of the town.
Right.
I know in the cities, there are so many of them in use that they're a commodity. Like, you own the license, you're gonna sell it to somebody else. Well, we don't really look at it that way here. It's like, we're awarding you a license to use. If it's not being used,
Right.
we want somebody to use it. And we retain, obviously, the ability to show some judgment on what sites are appropriate for that. So, please keep in mind that, I get where you're coming from. One way or the other, I think I'd like to see that license in use in that part of town with some responsible, ownership and management as soon as possible. Now, with that, I don't mind granting you some time to make that work, but it's not just, in my case, well, let's sit back and let them see if they can sell it to somebody else. That's really not our concern, that part of it.
Right, I understand. So we will see the license in the depot area, the same area?
Well, it's I don't want to nail ourselves down to that. Technically, we're not, it doesn't have a geography, but we're allowed to use geography as a determining factor in where to award it. So that's part of the upside of your having it. One is, you guys have managed the license excellent, without any problem over the entirety of your license, if I'm not mistaken. But the other benefit to it is it serves a part of town that, if you went away, would otherwise not be served. So that is a factor.
Right, I understand. I understand. We'll work on it and I'll let you know as soon as possible if any changes to, or we stay on that location by the depot, at that landlord building, if you're not gonna sell it, or we will find some other location to move the license.
But we retain our right to act too, you know, right? in the-
Right, I think we're very much, I guess that's how I see it, to give you 6 months, but with the caveat that we're willing to enforce Chapter 138, Section 77, withdrawing the license, at the end of that 6 months, if we can't find a
I
resolution.
understand. I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to close the hearing for consideration of cancellation of Fallon's Wine and Spirits liquor license.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And,
Everybody okay with 6 months? The motion has written?
yeah.
Yeah.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to MGL Chapter 138, Section 77, to give Udacha Incorporated, doing business as Fallon's Wine and Spirits, 6 months' time, up to 6 months' time to,
I've listed options because I didn't know what the direction would
right,
be.
to reopen and operate the business, transfer the license to a suitable location, or transfer the license to a suitable location in business, given that the license has failed to conduct the licensed business.
Do we want to, suitable location?
Subject to board, yeah. Well, that's implicit in the law anyways,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll second that
So the
motion.
question, what's the suitable location would be?
Well, that's, I don't think that's gonna be part of the motion, right?
That's not part of the
It's, we have that authority anyway under the law, so it doesn't need to be part of the motion.
Right, no, just for me it will be helpful if I know what location would be suitable. I know there's a, can
Well,
be
no,
possible.
when we see it.
Okay. All right.
And it has something to do, obviously, the people involved are equally, I don't want to be, too glib about it. I mean, who's involved in the management and site locations always factor into it. We can't guarantee in advance any location, I don't think.
I don't think we can. I will tell you, solely from my perspective, the fact that you're on one side of the town and cover a different geography is meaningful, but I think there are other areas that could, the corridor out to Air is also a possibility, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be in that exact building, but my personal preference would be to see something that's more geographically diverse than right downtown in the common.
Right, I mean, even 119 out toward Groton is, equally serves another part of town that is not served.
Different business areas.
Not-
Right.
It's not our business to be giving you the
Right,
suggestion.
I just, just a heads up, what's the other area could use this store in their neighborhood.
And I
Thank
would
you.
certainly refer you to our deliberations on the licensee that was teed up to potentially receive this license that we denied.
Yeah,
I think we discussed the location pretty extensively.
Right.
okay, so that was the reason, just because of location, right?
It's a big factor, yeah.
It was a deaf factor or something else was there or not?
I think it was,
Well, we wrote a decision to the
Yeah, I
ABCC,
know.
which is a public record that you could request, and it details out the location challenge that the board felt.
We can in fact provide it with them.
I'd be glad to.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. We had that motion.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Item number 6, post-community agreement negotiations with proposed marijuana facilities. Mr. DeCoste?
That's me. All right, so, catch up, sorry.
before we get into this, can I, what's the goal of this discussion? Tonight, this agenda item?
So it's an update on where the negotiations are.
Okay.
And I've forwarded to each of you a draft of an HCA that I think is prepared to, we could act upon.
The only reason I ask what the goal is I haven't had a chance, since we got it this afternoon, I haven't had a chance to review it. I very much want an update. I'm not remotely prepared to vote up or down, or really even comment on the
Okay.
ECA that we've got. And was gonna push back if the goal was to approve or not approve the HCA.
I mean, I think, based upon the negotiations, I think it would certainly be within our purview to do that. And perhaps after hearing a summary, you'll feel otherwise, but it's not really rocket science. We've got a number of documents that we've gotten from the CCC, and so for the one that is prepared and ready to go, the one I did forward to you all, I do feel as though it's at a point where we could vote on it, but if you're not at that point.
Well, and I think that was your mandate, right? You know, to bring us something that just in the intervening 3 hours since we've got it, I haven't had a chance to read it.
So, on November 4th is when we decided that I was going to be the person that was going to negotiate the HCA with the 3 different potential operators in Littleton, Littleton Apothecary, Community Care Collaborative, and G7 Labs. And we're at different places with each of them. I'll talk about G7 Labs first. Because they don't have any sales to speak of, any traceable sales. Obviously they're in business to sell their services, but it's not retail sales, so it's not necessarily traceable. There are 3 HCAs executed in the state right now that I'm using as kind of a boilerplate or kind of a guiding documents to help me to make some recommendations back to you all, and none of them had any type of financial investment made by the operators, with the opportunity for them to reopen. So we can have that conversation. I'm not at the point where I'm still in negotiations with them, so I don't get too heavy in the weeds. In fact, we're meeting tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. So the other one that I'm meeting tomorrow as well is Littleton Apothecary. And if each of you had seen the note from Chris, there's a pretty big gap between where we are and where they are relative to negotiations. So hopefully, Chrissy from Town Council. Hopefully we're going to close that gap tomorrow, and we'll have something that's agreeable to both parties. So that will be coming back before us. And the one that we have been able to negotiate is Community Care Collective, which is the one on King Street. And you have the drafts in front of you. The standard HCA that's being negotiated across the state, similarly to, I mentioned with G7 Labs, I looked at a number of other HCAs around the Commonwealth. Got a lot of guidance from Town Council, got a lot of guidance from the documents and the research that we did as the working group, and from the Cannabis Control Commission, and different guiding documents we've gotten through the MMA, and kind of the standard HCA for an adult use retail establishment is obviously the 3% we voted on. The state allowed us to put a 3% tax. So that's that's included, but it's a given. Anybody that we negotiate an HCA with is going to give us the 3% sales tax. The other standard, if you will, across the Commonwealth is a 3% impact fee. And then there's different language around that impact fee, and with us doing our best diligence to improve the impact of such an establishment in our community, whether it be public safety, roadways, education. There's any number of ways that we can quantify impact. So, in addition, with this particular operator, it was always his hope or wish that he would be able to provide an SRO for the town of Littleton. We got some guidance from Town Council that you can't specifically earmark that $75,000, whatever the number is going to go specifically to an SRO. So outside of the HCA, but very much a part of this negotiation, Mr. Gianetta came forward with a development agreement that would pay the town of Littleton an additional 1%, which would have a 1% of gross sales or 100,000, whichever is greater, that would be the floor, up to $200,000 per year. So, and that is kind of to be used the sole discretion of Littleton. Part of the reasoning behind that, not part of the reasoning, I think the full reasoning on, I won't speak for Mr. Gianetta, but, because he had expressed that he was very interested in finding a funding source for the town of Littleton to hire an additional SRO. So that was kind of his way of doing this. I have seen some other communities who have done development agreements, so I felt comfortable with this. Chris reviewed it, he's comfortable with it. And there's nothing to say that 5 years down the road, or however many years down the road, we may get to a point where the operator doesn't want to pay it anymore, or maybe we're getting, we're getting so much money from the other negotiations that we don't see the need to operate with the development agreement anymore. But it's just that, it's a development agreement to help the town as this business develops, so we can better understand the impact of such a business in town. So,
Can you help me
Yep.
understand what is a development agreement? I guess this is the first time I've come across something that's called that. I don't really know. I don't know what it is and what other contexts they're utilized in this.
no, I can't help it. I mean, it's something that was proposed to us as something, as a creative way for additional funds to be gifted in a way to the town.
Okay.
At the sole, like I said, at the sole discretion, I think that language is actually in there in the paragraph 3. Yeah. The town shall use the above reference payment in its sole discretion. So, I was very happy with the negotiating process with Community Care Collective, and to Chris's point in the email, it seemed like everything was in a good place, and Chris felt as though this is a solid post-community agreement that puts the best interest of the community at heart, but also gives the operator the opportunity to move forward with the licensing process.
So in HCA, there's a 3% sales tax and a 3% impact, and then the 1% to
Above and beyond. Right. So the willingness to come forward with kind of his best foot was, it was a very cordial and amiable negotiation. Mr. Gianetta was very generous in his offering, and I'm going through this for the last few months. I think that this is, we're at a place where we can certainly execute a host community agreement with this operator and let the process continue for licensing.
comments from the board.
How is the Cannabis Control Commission, do we have any insight into how the Cannabis Control Commission will view that development agreement?
It's not going to them.
And so
So my answer is no.
consequently, they,
I don't have any insight into how they'll view it. that if they had a problem with it, and they said that we couldn't do it, then obviously we'd have to terminate the development agreement. But there are other communities that have done it.
There are, okay. I guess that's what I was looking for, but I know that they've been very sensitive, the Cannabis Control Commission has been very sensitive about municipalities requiring things in the host community agreement that are above and beyond what they consider to be. And they're in a tiff with the legislature right now about who's allowed to review HCA's and nonsense like that.
Which is why this is not in the host community agreement.
Okay.
So they've written very specific language about what can be in the host community agreement, and that's why this additional, these additional funds are outside of that. And, I mean, as far as the calling it a development agreement, I guess we could call it an MOU, we could call it any number of other documents. It just happens to be called a development agreement, and Chris was comfortable with that, so.
I mean, the idea of the development agreement is consistent with what I was looking for. I think both parties have, both retail establishments have promised things above and beyond the standard terms of a host community agreement. I'm adamant that we have something to wave around in the court of public opinion should they choose not to follow through on what they've committed to doing, understanding that
So
those things, you know, an MOU may not be an enforceable contract, but.
True. Well, I guess that's part of why I like this, not to, again, I'm still in negotiations with the other two operators, but one of the other proposals is offering to pay, I think it's what you're referencing, Chase, something above and beyond the host community agreement. But that is something that is not being executed with the town, it's being executed under a different entity, which the town as a whole would benefit from, but we really wouldn't have any control over that. It would be under a 501c3, I would imagine.
And town council is comfortable with the development agreement?
He drafted
He
it.
drafted it? I don't have any problems.
Yeah. I think I did send that subsequent to when I sent you the HCA.
Yeah, I've got both of them.
And I apologize, that came over later than I had hoped. But I was hoping to get these out last week so that everybody had an opportunity to review them with their packets, but I'm not Chris's boss.
What happens under the host community agreement if the owner sells the business?
It's in there.
Okay.
Yeah. All severability and all that is listed in the. And that's per the direction of CCC. Successors and assigns is paragraph 12, sorry. So it's successors and assigns, and
So it looks like they need our assent to assign it.
right.
Does anything in the host community agreement with CCC, you really chose a bad acronym, Dave, sorry.
I'll probably call this company 16 different names throughout this process. I think I did it tonight. Sorry.
Does this host community agreement require Community Care Collective to install a fence or other mitigative measures between CCC and the residential abutters?
That's not the purview of the HCA. That's along the process. That would be in front of planning board, but we don't dictate that in the HCA.
That's not what town council said. Town council was quite clear that we could require other things outside of the 3%, for example.
That's not the advice that I got from town council. That's all stuff that will come up with licensing through the licensing process with planning board.
Oh, and I understand that.
I could try to get a hold of Chris. If they couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately, I just
If I may,
got that later tonight.
Sure.
through the chair real quick. I've been on record a number of times in this room stating I intend on working with the neighbors, already had meetings with them. I've never seen myself through my research, anything like that in a host community agreement. Definitely, site conditions are typically through planning board in the special permit process, but I'll remain on record right now stating that, I intend on sticking to what I've already proposed, which was a fence around the entire perimeter, whether it be a 6-foot fence. I've even suggested where it's a commercial property, I know I can go 8 feet. So I just wanted, I understand the concern.
Yeah, and I don't mean to suggest that you wouldn't. My concern about making sure it's in the HCA has absolutely nothing to do with you, Dave, and more to do with every once in a while, we get folks in here who remember certain things that were not necessarily written down in contracts that get misremembered or remembered in slightly subtly different ways. And so I guess I would be interested in seeing something like that memorialized, a firm written commitment, understanding that you have every objective of doing that. And given that,
I just reached out to Chris, just while we're sitting here. Is that what, can I do that?
Shouldn't, it's just that you can't communicate with each other. Again,
So
weird.
just ignore that. Or ignore that text. No, I'm kidding.
Mr. Chairman.
I got nothing back from him yet, but, I mean, if that were something that town council said, you absolutely could put it in there, is that something that you'd be willing to amend? All right.
As we wait, Mr. Sanders, was there something you wanted to say?
Oh, I have something to say, yes.
I mean, sorry, Mr. Sanders, can I interrupt you? I have no intention in voting on this, regardless of what Chris says tonight. I think it would be, no one has seen this, the community hasn't seen this, we've seen this for less than 2 or 3 hours. It would be a mistake to vote on it tonight, and I couldn't vote affirmatively for it.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Sanders,
I'll just say, well, if you wouldn't mind, George, on record, I want to, I support the proposal and specifically want to call out our colleague Chuck for putting in those hours. I think I was the man who volunteered him for the job over the holidays. A thankless job, but he'll get thanked anyway. Thank you for the progress to date, how close we are, and the fact that we're essentially ready to act on one of them. But I do agree with Chase's point that on a matter like this, we should have it out circulating at least between now and the next meeting. I would say to let the public a chance to look it over so that there's any input back before it, but I don't see anything I object to it.
Okay, I
Just my opinion.
appreciate your opinion, appreciate both of your opinions.
Anyone want to make a comment? Because we're just going to close this up probably, right?
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, according to a great deal. The thing that I'm sort of kind of concerned with is that this board is not all together on this item. With respect to the selectmen that has been working on this and pulling this together, that is good. We have 3 entities that he's working with. From what I gather, one has been concluded as to what, but there's 2 that's incomplete. So supposedly tomorrow, I guess he's going to work on those 2 to try to conclude that. I think as a board, collectively, you need to bring the three entities back to this board with whatever the approval is, so that everybody will know what the three are. And the citizen will know what the three are. Or are you gonna do it individually, one at a time, and bring it back before the board and approve of it? Or are you gonna do it collective and bring all three of them back, so you will understand all of it? And I agree with the selectman here saying, we only received this X hours ago, haven't had a chance to digest it. I find, as a citizen, that it's not complete. What you bring back as a draft is incomplete.
Well, until it's approved, it's a draft, George.
Well, yeah, it's a draft, and I find that the status of it is incomplete, because you say you got two more elements to resolve whatever the issues are in order to have it. So if you approve this tonight, you're approving something that's incomplete, with one element of it being complete, and there are three elements. I don't think that's the way the town ought to be running business.
Can you just, can I ask you, what's the three elements you're talking about? Because there's three separate businesses that we're talking about. And approving one doesn't mean, we don't have to bring all three at the same time. Granted, we probably aren't gonna act on this tonight because we have to review it and let other people see it. But if this applicant is all ready in 2 weeks and the other two aren't, there's no reason to holding him up.
Well, if you heard me clearly, I said, either you're gonna bring it back individually, which means that you have two, when I say elements, I'm talking about the two other applicants.
Okay.
There's a total of three that you're working on, right?
Right. Correct.
Okay, so you have one, I assume it's this gentleman right here.
That's correct.
That is complete.
Correct.
Now, if you collectively prove this, then I look at it as that because you made a statement, there's two elements that you're going to get with tomorrow to try to resolve whatever the difference are. But if you approve it tonight, are those two elements in that? Or are you just proving this gentleman right here tonight only? And making the
So this-
precise,
If I may.
wait a minute, and you're making precise statement that it is only him that you're approving.
May I speak? Okay, so,
You have to ask me as chair.
well, I looked at both of you. I respect you both. I'd liken this to if three different developers came in and they were looking to build a house, and they came in front of the planning board. If they were all building a house in Littleton, they don't all have to come before the planning board on the same night. These are three separate business entities that are looking to do business in Littleton in different locations in town. This applicant they all completed their applications, they've all been negotiating in good faith. The negotiations with this particular applicant are further along than the other negotiations. So it's not anything to do with, if we can't approve him unless we have the other two here, because one doesn't have any bearing on the other whatsoever.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but when you presented this information, you didn't make that clarity.
I apologize.
Because what I understood to be, you have a group of three applicants, and one of them that you have worked through with, and you made the statement that you had two other ones that you're gonna work on tomorrow. So that's where I had the concern, was that whatever you're gonna approve tonight, it wasn't for this gentleman right here. It was like what you brought back to them as to what you was going to approve. And you'll work out whatever that was gonna bring. But I understand clearly now that you're dealing with him with regards to what's already been taken care of, and you gotta work with the other two. I understand that you're not bringing them all back collectively, but you didn't make that clarity to me. That's why I questioned it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on this? Because obviously, I think we're gonna bring it back in 2 weeks.
No, I'll get, I mean, I'm assuming that this is not something that, Chase is not comfortable voting on it. I mean, just one of the comments that was made tonight was, we need to make sure that we get this out. I understand the board taking a look at this, but in the past, when we've done the host community agreements, Cooper Farm, for instance, we didn't distribute that to the community so that we could get input on what the host community agreement could be. It's our responsibility to negotiate the host community agreement, so I'm not looking for input, frankly.
No, I just, personally, I want everyone in this board to be comfortable reading it. That's what my concern is.
Okay, so that's, on November 4th, when the board charged me with going out there and negotiating host community agreements, between me and town council, this is what we've come forward with. So
Okay.
I consider this an end product, and I'm very comfortable with the amount of effort and time and work that's gone into it. If we wanted to put a contingency on there that said that there would be 6 to 8 foot fencing, depending upon what the planning board dictated around the property, I'd be willing to make that amendment here on the fly, and I can appreciate wanting to take a look at it, but
I'm not voting on something I got 2 hours ago. I'm just not.
understood, that's fine. I just,
And I also fundamentally disagree that there shouldn't be an opportunity for the public to at least.
any other host community agreement we've negotiated in the past, we've never opened it up to the public. We've never published it so that the public could look at it until after it was negotiated and it was signed. So that's the history that I've experienced to this point. So if in fact it's public now because we're in an open public meeting and this document is in front of us, understood that there's going to be eyes on it. But I feel pretty strongly that we should not be taking input from the public saying that we should have negotiated this or should have negotiated that. That's not what we were charged with doing. The Board of Selectmen is the negotiator of a host community agreement with any of these operators, according to the state.
Why
So-
shouldn't we be taking commentary and criticism? I mean, okay, so if people disagree with us, they disagree with us. I absolutely agree. It's our
They can
5
certainly give us
signatures that
feedback,
go
but I
on.
don't think we should be, I feel as though it's our place to do those negotiations. It's not,
Oh, I agree. But
Publics.
if what we're doing can't stand up to the scrutiny of the public, then what are we doing? Right? I have no problem getting
I
feedback and having folks
absolutely feel
disagree
comfortable
with
putting
us.
this forward to the public. And I don't think there's gonna be any scrutiny. I think this is a well negotiated, I think we're getting a lot for the community. I think we're well served with this host community agreement. And that's what I was charged with doing, and that's why I have it before you tonight.
Well, I think you did a good job, but I just think I'd like to see it, since we weren't able to get it in a packet, just put it off to the next meeting to vote on. I don't anticipate doing anything but voting for it as is, but procedurally, I think that's a format I would prefer.
I respect that.
So there's no motion to go through, so it will just be on the next one. Okay, item number 7 is tax increment financing proposal for new hotel.
I don't think we're at a place where we're prepared to go forward with that, right?
Right. We're still working on it, there's still information coming in, and we probably should be ready for the next meeting. So this topic will come up on the 27th, is it? Okay.
Just so the public knows, we are working with the office upstairs and looking at the finance implications, and the assessor's office and the finance office, so it's not that, nothing's been done,
No,
there's lots being done behind the scenes, it's just that we're not at a point where we're ready to discuss it openly.
yeah, I think there's a lot of information that was presented to me this week that I want to go over 2 or 3 times, because a lot of it was very confusing to me, and so we'll just put that off and get that taken care of. Continue, number 8, is this a public hearing on a certain time?
It is, yes. We should skip over this for now. Look at how good we're doing on time.
I know.
Should be a college football championship every
Go Tigers.
Perhaps number 9?
Number 9.
Cindy?
Boards, committees without annual budgets. So, Ms. Napoli, this is your topic that was put on.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of the budget process, one of the things that has come to the attention to the board really over the past few years as we've been working on with our boards and committees that we appoint is that we've identified some committees that we charge them with a particular mission or an objective, but we don't assign a budget to that board or committee so that they can then fulfill their, the goal that they're trying to achieve. So what we had done, was it last spring? We sent out a letter to every board and committee just reiterating their mission and their goals. And we asked them to submit back to us an update on where they were, and also to let us know if they required any funding or if they needed any additional resources from the board to help them achieve their objectives. The only one that came back to us in writing form was the Historical Commission. But in conversations with the Shade Tree Committee, I know that they're seeking $5,000 in funding for their objective. And then, as Mr. Sanders pointed out tonight, there's a line item in the budget for $1,200 for the Disability Commission.
So is that in the budget, the Disability Commission one?
Apparently it is.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of that, so I'm glad that he brought that to our attention. And it's something that would come up through the budget process anyways. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to the board about was, do we want to ask these committees to come in and present to us their request, or give us an update? How do we want to handle this as far as?
Can I jump in on behalf
Sure.
of the Economic Development Committee?
Yeah.
We did do a mission statement and kind of a vision and everything, and set just 3 very specific goals, so that we were trying to eat the whole elephant.
Okay.
Taking one bite at a time, and so I'm kind of surprised that you don't have it, but I'll confirm with that. We had a lot of changeover because Neil had resigned.
Right.
Ivan had resigned, and so we're very much in the rebuilding
Okay.
phase right now, and with Caroline being new, maybe she may have submitted it to Diane and didn't submit it to the Board of Selectmen. I'm not really sure how that went
Sure.
down, but I can get that. And at our last meeting, we had said, it's important for us to get in front of the Board of Selectmen, let them know what our goals are, and make sure we're in alignment with
Right.
the Board of Selectmen. So I think that's important, not just for the Economic Development Committee. I think it's important for everybody to make sure that we don't have committees and boards that are out there doing, just kind of going down a path and not really getting anything done or not having any direction. If we
Yeah.
can put them on, I mean, you referenced the master plan relative to the Economic Development Committee, and I think that's important that we tie everything back into the master plan, and we tie it back into the selectmen's goals. So I think it's very worthwhile to have, even if it's just 1 or 2 committees at each of our next 5 or 6 meetings.
Right.
To try to knock them off and make sure that everybody's on the same page and going down the right path.
Right. And then I think that's great. That's a great idea. I think that's definitely how we should proceed. Joe had mentioned the volunteer corps, which was one that wasn't even on my radar, so that was a great suggestion.
Yeah, and to be honest, I had very preliminary discussions with one of the leaders of the organization. He requested, if possible, some kind of funding, because right now, they're running on a $500 donation from the Business Association. And this is a group that volunteers and does training monthly in case we have an emergency that they're going to be called on. They're not asking for a lot of money, they're just looking for
Right,
some kind of funding in case they have to go buy something.
right. Okay.
Should,
Go ahead.
when we communicated with these committees, at any point did we communicate what our broad priorities might be for them? I mean, infrastructure, improvements versus training for their members versus, educational outreach for the community.
Right.
Did we communicate that, or did we just sort of leave it open?
You know
to
what we
them?
did, Chase, was we took it off of the town's website that said this is the charge of this committee. It was basically like a cut and paste,
Okay.
the information that was already there. There was another chart that I had created where I tied in, I think, some of the objectives of these committees with the master plan. And that was really a goal that I think we had talked at one meeting, was just to try to bring it all together. But that is something that we should definitely look at and have that dialogue, I think, with these boards and committees, and see what they're working on, what their objectives are, but also tie that back to what we believe would be beneficial through the master plan. Paul?
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. Yeah. This is great to see this, this winnowing and oversight work to bring these forward. I think this universe of items that are under certain departments or committees is still part of a bigger universe of budget orphans. It's specifically items that don't have a department or committee to advocate for them that it's always a challenge to find out how best to make sure they're represented in the budget process, and that's something in the past we've either created savings accounts for certain ends, like open space purchases or specific building projects or whatever, which sometimes show up in the capital plan, but they, unless they're specifically advocated for by somebody, they don't always get their due there. Infrastructure projects, that sort of thing. If it isn't coming from a specific department, and it's still a priority, that's expressed, say, in the master plan, for instance, or we've talked about in general terms, but it doesn't fall neatly in somebody's to-do list category.
Right.
That's the sort of thing I think we ought to be thinking, like, are we missing anything here? This kind of covers it internally, in my mind, for those items that should be covered by a department or committee, but beyond that, I think we ought to go back and take a second look at the various accounts that are funded through the capital process too, to make sure that projects that we've talked about or savings efforts that we've indicated support for are being met in the budget process.
Okay. So how do you?
Maybe we can discuss that tomorrow night when the FinCom's
Oh,
meeting
that's a
with
good
us.
idea.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't have an immediate to-do item
Right.
on that, just like, and maybe Cheryl has thought that through already, and if she hasn't, maybe she's got some thoughts on how best to, make sure that the budget process going forward incorporates, as I say, the historic phrase for them has been budget orphans, how do you account for them?
I assume with the agreement of both boards, we can add this on to tomorrow night's discussion rather fluidly. As far as the finance department, I think they're looking for a little bit of direction from the board or boards as far as what next steps we should take.
Can I suggest, so looking at just the historical commission's budget, I would suggest that we consider this in sort of two groupings, right? Like if someone, disability commission, for example, they want $1,200 to do education stuff. That seems very obvious to me, right? Yes, carry on and do that. That's important to your mission. I see certain things in the historical commission budget that make perfect sense to me. Again, education, member education of the historical commission, bulk mailing regarding education about demolition delays. Those are really, I think those things fit very nicely under their purview. But then there are other things that are sort of bigger, broader town priorities, like $5,000 to $6,000 within their budget associated with 12 Robinson Road. And how do we want to fit those? So I would suggest that we consider some minimum threshold for certain activities that we're always going to approve, right? We're always going to approve $1,500 of member educations to carry out their mission.
Right.
Right, but above that, okay, let's talk about that. $5,000 or $6,000 for 12 Robinson Road. That's not chump change, and it's something that we are still trying to figure out how to manage. So,
And so we just approved $60,000 to remove the chimney gap and.
right, exactly. So, I don't want to make everybody come in before us and say we would like to spend $1,000 to educate our membership on how to appropriately carry out our mission. That seems really obvious to me, that we're always going to say yes to that.
Right.
And can I just add some piece of information? I realize that this doesn't at all get to the point that you're making, but I just want to mention that late this afternoon, I received a revised historical commission budget that does not include the first item for $3,000 regarding the door replacement because it's already been addressed.
Okay.
But your point is still very much, I think, on the table for discussion by the board, which is whether or not we meet with all of the so-called budget orphans, or if we only meet with those requesting things above and beyond, perhaps professional development, or things that are small costs.
Right.
That fit
I guess so,
within
yeah,
their
I see a certain threshold in which, carry on, do your thing,
Right.
follow through on your mission.
Right.
Empowerment, just-
Yeah, go do it. We've put you in that place, or the community has put you in that place.
Right.
Be trusted with a couple $1,000s to spend it reasonably, right?
Right, right. I know particularly that the Shade Tree Committee was offered to come in and speak with us. I know they have concerns about some of the trees on the common, and that was the crux of their request for funding, so I think it would be worthwhile to have them come in and talk to us a little bit more about that and explain that to us. Personally, that's my thought. And then I think there was, for BPAC and the Transportation Advisory Council as well, I think did we receive some information from them?
Yeah. but-
More recently about a
About a
grant.
grant.
Yeah.
Which I think sounds great, but there was also, one of the things that came up in our meeting is apparently we get funding from the state for every Uber ride that originates from the town of Littleton. but
I
we're-
read that the other day.
Yeah, but we're not quite sure where that money's going and how it's being processed, or I think a member of FinCom was gonna look into that.
The funding that is received by that legislation goes into a special account, and it's held, and it's only can be used for specific purposes.
Right.
It's basically going to be transportation funding.
Right.
and allocated to that. At this point, I don't think we have a material amount of funding. I think we have a few $1,000s
Yeah,
in
it's
that
not a
budget.
lot.
Or in that revenue, it's not a budget, in that revenue account, I could have to check on the actual number. But I understand that typically, cities and towns arm the public works or the highway department to look at uses for that type of stuff. So I know that Chris Stoddard and Cheryl Stella are both fully aware of those
Right.
dollars and kind of thinking about what proposals can be made at a future time.
Okay.
If we can go back to the BPAC
Yeah.
and what those grants are, is there any reason that they can't apply for those grants? It has nothing to do with the funding.
Yeah, no.
Or we can't just authorize Nina to sign them?
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
coming from
fine.
us.
right, I
Yeah.
mean, that's within we've talked about making that change in terms of policies for grants under a certain threshold
Yeah.
that don't tie the town to doing anything
Right.
above and beyond the scope of the
Right,
grant.
because that's time, yeah, I have no objection to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we have to put 50% skin in the game and it's a $20,000 grant,
Then let's talk, yeah.
So then since we're on this subject, and I don't think that this is controversial, that by any means for the public to be concerned, if you're ready to vote, you could make a motion to approve the town administrator to sign the Mass Trails grant, assuming it's awarded for the area near Cooper Farm Estates, I believe it is, correct?
Yeah, it's a path, it's supposed to be around.
Upgrading a
Yeah.
path, yes.
Great.
Move that the Board of Selectmen authorize the town administrator to sign the Mass Trails grant for work near the Cooper property,
Assuming it's awarded.
assuming it's awarded.
second.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So do we agree on inviting back the Shade Tree Committee and the Historic Commission? Do we think we need to invite back the Historic Commission? I'm just trying to get a short list of,
I think 10 grand's, understanding that, I guess now 7 grand, that's a decent chunk of change, and there's still money on there for 12 Robinson Road. I guess I wouldn't mind a few minutes speaking with them.
okay. And then I really would like the volunteer corps to come
Let
in.
me take care of that, I think I can get
Yeah.
them to commit.
I think that would be really helpful. And then, so,
EDC, I guess, Chuck indicated something maybe out there with EDC, right?
right,
Yes. Yeah, so we're going to, in all likelihood, maybe for the next meeting, have a couple of applicants that are gonna sit in front of us and
Okay.
hopefully get appointed. So
right, great,
we're fighting over spots now,
all right.
It's a good problem. to have.
And then,
ever since we started serving beer.
so we'll bring back Historic Commission, Shade Tree Volunteer Corps. What about the Cultural Council? We don't have any update from them. I'm not quite sure where they're
Speaking of Robinson Road,
at. So,
it'd be nice to get an update.
okay,
Go back to the cultural council. at least in the last couple of years, they've been supplying us with something. Years gone by, it was, they even had made presentations, awards, and things that this board never
Yeah,
knew about.
Right.
But they haven't come back this year with anything,
Yeah,
have they?
they've been better in the past year of keeping us in the loop, so
Yeah, I
I'm
went to
assuming.
an event last year, but,
Same.
yes, would you like to get, I think it'd be good to get an update from them?
I think so.
Okay,
Can we request that we keep the updates brief, though?
yeah,
You
like
know,
a time limit.
This thing could turn into a 2-hour endeavor, and I,
3 slides.
yeah, seriously, 3 slides, 5 minutes.
Okay. And then, EDC, so the other one, the Littleton Coalition Against Addiction, that is under the purview of Elder and Human Services. So maybe that's something that we can work out through the budget process.
That's certainly what I would prefer to see, is any of these things that are budget orphans that can be slotted into an appropriate place within an established budgetary structure, you know? I don't want
Yeah.
to create more work for our department heads, but, you know, Shade Tree Committee can that fit under Chris's purview somewhere, you know, can the opioid,
With him kind of being the mentor.
yeah,
type of thing.
right, and
Well, I'd like to have a discussion, it's like,
orphan.
what is your mission, you know? I mean, well, not your mission, but what's your goal, you know,
Right.
within your mission, you know?
The Shade Tree
oh, I
Committee,
meant from a budgetary standpoint.
Right, yeah, you're right. It actually, it used to be that the highway superintendent was always a member of the Shade Tree Committee, remember?
oh, the tree warden.
Right,
Right.
in that capacity,
And
so
there
there was
still
always
is a
that.
tree, yeah, there was
Oh,
still
yeah,
that
so
connection.
communication. But
So
same
maybe we
with
can talk about that.
Littleton
Yeah.
Coalition Against Addiction, you know, fits
Right.
under Elder and Human Services.
Right, so that is where it's kind of been slotted, so we can work that out probably through the budget process.
We have a public hearing, 2 minutes. And
Okay.
I just want, Mr. Sanders, if you want, because we have a public hearing coming up, but I want to make sure you get heard.
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I just wanted to bring something to the attention of this board, and that is that I spoke to the new building commission, and he told me that he had been appointed as the state and the federal enforcement agent for the disability agent. I spoke with Diane, and she said she knew nothing about that being taken away from the Disability Commission. I don't know, but that's what I was told, and he said that he would work very close with the Disability Commission, because I pointed out to him that the previous Disability Commission said that the town of Littleton did not have a Disability Commission. And stuff had been bypassed and coming to the Disability Commission, and we sort of had some real concern about that, because Diane went to the state and said, well, what's going on here? Why is this stuff being bypassed? For instance, Shaker Lane with the elevator down there, that bypassed her because they said that there was no Disability Commission here. So I don't know if this board taking that authority away from Diane, from the Disability Commission, then someone should have told the Disability Commission that is what they was going to do.
Mr. Chairman, I assume there's a misunderstanding here. Our building commissioner was appointed as the ADA coordinator, which was previously held by, my understanding, the prior town administrator. The Disability Commission is a separate entity altogether. I certainly can't speak to the history of the Shaker Lane elevator and what transpired there, but I think there's a misunderstanding.
Okay. That can be worked out.
Yep, okay,
All right, we have a public hearing.
okay.
Continuation.
Continuation of a public hearing.
Would we be coming back to number 9 before we, I just have a number of questions. We don't have to open the hearing at exactly 8 PM. That's certainly the discretion of the chair if you wish. I would just recommend we come back to item 9.
We'll come back to item 9.
Thank you.
Move that the board vote to reopen and immediately continue the soil removal hearing related to 64 Spectacle Pond Road.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to reopen the hearing. All those in favor?
I,
Aye. All those opposed? Ms. Gould, do you have information for us?
I really don't have anything to add. We, as had scheduled a follow-up because, as you recall, there was a foreclosure sale scheduled last week, and we wanted to be sure that it got postponed. I alerted Nina as soon as I got the word that it was postponed, and then alerted you again when I got it in writing.
Thank you.
And in fact, there is no foreclosure sale. Mr. Green has corrected the default condition as he promised he would do, and he's in good standing. I've also confirmed that the Seth Donahoe from Dillis and Mish has been retained with an advance fee, and they've started the work, and as of about Monday or Tuesday of this week, where are we, of last week, I obtained from Town Hall the plans of the septic system, which showed all of the elevations on the lot prior to any disturbance, which is what Mr. Donahoe had asked for, Seth Donahoe, the engineer, had asked for, in order for him to have the baseline, and then he can do the pre-existing conditions versus the existing conditions and show you all the grades. I also asked him to confirm that the hay bales in place were adequate to hold things while he's doing his work. And I believe he will have at least a preliminary report of some sort toward the end of this month of January. He's just, with weather and the holidays and everything, really just started.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So when you say work has begun as of last week, you mean administrative work? There's no...
No work on the site, no, I'm
Site
sorry.
work.
Just his engineering work in order to determine, go out, measure, and determine the elevations and the drainage and everything that he was asked to do for this board.
Okay. Any expectations on
When
when
it will be done?
there'll be site work done?
Literally, given the holidays and the fact that I just submitted to him the prior septic plan to show him the conditions when things were started, I would say 2 weeks to have a preliminary report from him, maybe 3. He had originally said that he expected to be completing this work. Weather allowing, we anticipate completing the work in early January. That was back in early December. So, given that he didn't get the stuff to start till early January, I'm thinking late January now. And then, if you recall, we had the snow on the ground and he couldn't get out there.
Not a problem now, huh?
No snow now.
No, I know.
Till soon.
I'd ask your client to take a look at the stabilization measures that he has in place. When I went by there, I noted he's got silt fence, for example, on the top of a hill, but not at the bottom of the hill. I didn't see any straw or hay out there as cover. I'm not sure if he was stabilizing an area for a conscom permit or planning board purposes, I'm not sure it would pass muster. And I'd like him to take another look at that. Make sure that he's both got some amount of ground cover and he's got silt fences in a place that's going to prevent runoff of.
I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public right now? Anything from the board?
Mostly interested if the abutters have anything to report that would be of use to us.
It's just, we haven't seen any work being done yet, that's all. Which is.
And through the chair, no work will be done on site until we report back to this board. It'll just be the engineer going out to measure.
Okay, so you're going to come back to us and say, this is what the engineer is planning to do, get our blessing.
Yes.
And then, get the go.
Yes, I don't think he should do any work on that site without your blessing.
I agree. And in fact, I think that as a part of the proposal and part of the comments that Attorney Heath had made to us, the board may wish to request a bond before work is performed as well.
That's what I heard the board say.
Right, and my understanding is we were going to ask you, to actually go through the formal soil removal permits process.
Requirements, yeah.
So we'll go through the documentation, engineering process before, and then get approval here before work commences on site to correct any condition.
Yeah, when I said work, I meant engineering work. I didn't mean any physical work.
Move to continue again?
So moved.
To a certain date?
Yes, please.
to, is that there?
Yes, January 27th.
Move to continue the soil removal hearing relating to 64 Spectrum Lawn Road to Monday, January 27th, 2020, at 8 PM to be held in room 103 of 37 Shire Street, Milton, Mass.
Motion made and seconded, all those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Back to number 9.
Mr. Chair, do you want to take up number 9 with number 11? Since they're sort of related, and then maybe just address tenant committee vacancies? Okay. It's up to you.
How do they relate?
Because the Economic Development Committee is referenced in that, in number 11. There was an idea that came to fruition through our discussion about the Littleton Common Revitalization Committee. It might be a mission that the EDC might be interested in considering.
Collaborating with or taking over?
It was actually, it's really, I'm trying to figure out the best way to vocalize this. It's about using the EDC to really connect with our business community and discuss what's going on with our business community as it relates to housing and infrastructure and transportation, like what impacts are,
Survey, this is the one that you talked about doing surveys and trying to get.
maybe a survey or something like that, if you,
Not to push you off. and-
yeah.
Let's wrap, in my opinion, let's wrap up 9.
Yeah.
Sure.
We can have a deeper discussion about 11.
Yeah, that's
Otherwise,
fine.
you can see the
We've been jumping back and forth on
No, yeah, no, whatever you guys want to do.
I was just, Mr. Chairman, I was just seeking clarification on what boards and committees, because we were kind of right in the middle of that, and I was trying to write down the boards and
Oh, sure.
committees. And I just want to make sure I understand what the board's looking for, whether, for instance, in the scenarios where we are proposing a budgetary discussion versus an update, like we are with the Cultural Council, which we will ask them to limit to 5 minutes. Should we attempt, as was mentioned at one point, to see if the Finance Committee would like to also be present, if we do that jointly, or if the board just wishes to do it on its own first? I'm just seeking clarification so I know exactly what actions to take afterwards.
We do it on our own first. Yeah,
Yeah, if I may.
do it on our own first.
Okay, great.
So Nina, it was the Shade Tree
Mhm.
Committee, it was the Historic Commission,
Yes.
it was the Volunteer Court, and the Cultural Council.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, excellent. And were we taking action on others? I know we mentioned opioid, the LCAA, for instance. We talked about trying to put it with EHS. Is there a specific request that the
You know
board's
what,
making?
it might already be under,
May.
I think we need to clarify that with Cheryl. And,
Is it EHS or is it LBD?
no, it's
It is EHS,
Yeah. So I think we should check on that, clarify that. EDC, we'll have further discussion about that. Chuck's got
Economic Development Committee?
more information, yeah. And then the Master Plan Implementation Committee, I think that's part of,
Is that you, Rob?
we do need to discuss the Master Plan Implementation Committee and their budget request, which we've received information on it, I don't know.
Two meetings ago? 2 meetings ago?
Yeah,
Then we're going to do that during
we're gonna
budget
do,
meeting.
all right, so we're gonna do that during the budget meeting.
Budget
Okay.
meetings, but also at one point, we had discussed having MPIC on a future agenda, and I think it might be beneficial considering the scope. I don't know if we discussed this detail, but considering the scope of what MPIC does, that we perhaps have a working meeting for that as well. I don't know if that's part of a larger conversation, I don't know
Well, it really should be
specifically.
one with the planning board too, right?
Right.
Up to the board.
Yeah, yeah, so, okay.
And by the time you combine those, you got half the master plan implementation committee. That's true, too.
Okay.
So, should we try to arrange for a tri-board, so to speak, meeting in a working style? In other words, up in 307, where we're all around the table and can get into the,
We'll go to the fire station.
we can
So we
certainly
don't
do
fit it on
that
the
too.
table.
Good point, yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if the board has the same interpretation, but when, for the public's purposes, for the purpose of the public, when I refer to something as a working group meeting, typically, those are not televised, those are done just kind of in an opportunity to have a face-to-face conversation and discuss it. I don't know if the board interprets that the same way, but that's what I'm proposing when I say working meeting.
Yeah.
Fine with me.
We're not promoting the televising of it, but we need to, neither prohibiting it. That's, I think that kind of the,
That's a good point, yep.
we've
yep,
made,
fair
run
point.
across that before, yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
So we all set with 9 for now?
I think so.
Okay.
Church Meadows?
Church Meadows. This is, I think, finally coming, not to a close, but work that was done by a number of people on this committee over a year ago, and it was picked up again. This whole thing was brought to my attention by Jamie Cruz of the Agricultural Commission about 4 or 5 months ago, and I toured the site since then. Nina's been there with me, we've walked the land. I do have some diagrams here if someone wants to take a look at. And for a background on this, if you take a look at this plan, there's certain parts of this property toward the back of the flat part that hasn't been farmed in a while. And I think the plan we have going now is hoping to have a farmer come in that can take care of the entire parcel, which also means the lower field. And the lower field, I don't think has been touched in years, and the path going down to it's overgrown, so. So we went out to request for proposal, is that the correct terminology?
Yes,
And we had one applicant?
yes.
So it retains in the control of the Board of Selectmen, and we're the ones that would award this. And the applicant is Mr. Matheson, and he meets all the criteria for the number of years farming, his knowledge, and equipment, and it's all there, and we will have the property farmed properly. Is it for like 5 years?
5 years.
5
yes.
years, so.
Initially, but the board can extend it subject to town meeting approval for up to an additional, either, well, for roughly 25 years. I need to get clarification on the specific number of years.
But even that, when Nina and I walked with the Agricultural Commission, it was pointed out the amount of work that has to be done to make it fully usable, mostly toward the backside, even the process of maybe taking down trees so sunlight can hit the back part of the property and redo the road that goes down to the lower part. And it's like 2 different farming seasons, because that's wet down there, and I know very little about agricultural, but down there would be a late planting of probably something different that's on the top. But I was very encouraged with the idea that it would be professionally done, taken care of, and put to the use that the town wanted it to be used for. Comments?
I think it's great that
Yeah.
he implicates his 2 sons in the application.
The main thing I took away from it after Cheryl's review is that it meets all the minimum requirements and exceeds some of them. So it's all there, it's all in order.
So at this
legally,
point-
is there anything that we have to vote on this?
Well, I would recommend that initially, if the board is ready to move forward, that we award this request for proposals to Mr. Frank Matheson Jr. of Springbrook Farm, and that would at least give me the next steps to go to council and make sure that all the Ts were crossed and the Is were dotted, make sure that this is as it appears, and, you know, there's some legal technicalities that I just want to verify with them, and if everything appears correct, or if things are minor areas that need to be, a formality needs to be waived, then at least we could prepare the documentation for the meeting of January 27th and have the board vote to enter into the agreement. And that way we would actually be on the timeline that was proposed by council to be able to have this in place for February 1st. So I'd recommend that if the board's ready to move forward, that the board vote to award Mr. Frank Matheson Jr. of Springbrook Farm, the request for proposals for the Church Meadows farming.
So
Farming of Church Meadows.
Second. Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road.
Maybe not.
What is the benefit with Mr. Madison, working this property? What's the benefit for the town and Mr. Madison working this property?
Well, when we purchased the property, the idea was to have it be agricultural use. And it wasn't being used, in my opinion, in the property, a lot of wasted space. Mr. Matheson's gonna come in and farm it and use it as agricultural land. I don't even know what the fee is yet. We haven't determined that.
Well, it was proposed,
He proposed a few $100s a year, right?
yes, 200.
It's not necessarily a moneymaker for us. It's just agricultural land that will stay that way and be used for that.
I was just wondering what was the benefit, that's all.
And Mr. Sanders, one of the issues with it going unused is the growth of invasive species.
I understand,
that are all
I
over
took
the
out the
place.
growth.
Yeah. Okay. 11? I lost a little. All right. Committees. This is proposed by the vice chair, so Cindy.
Certainly. So I wanted to just get an update on where we stood with our appointed boards and committees to see what vacancies exist. The other thing that I wanted to recommend or suggest to the board to see if they were interested was to contact each one of these committees just in writing and ask them to give us an update. Some of these committees will be covered with the committees that we're going to invite back to make a presentation before the board, but the other ones that do not fall within that, that are not seeking a budget request from us, do we want to just reach out to them and get an update from them? I mean, we're 6 months away from some of them coming before us for a reappointment, so I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention and see what your thoughts were.
I'd request that we ask them for written updates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not a lot, 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
What have you been working on?
okay.
It's not a case where they have to appear, really, it's just
Right.
gives us an update what's going on.
Okay.
So that would be for the boards that are not already
That we're not already
overlapping
covering.
in the other piece.
Right,
Can I interject?
sure.
So, each of these boards, in theory, is submitting minutes to Diane.
In theory.
Theory.
In theory. I think we need to reiterate that expectation.
Yep.
And maybe we ask that they not only submit them to Diane, but they submit them to the town administrator's office so that we can get a copy of them, so that we can stay updated on what's going on. And then if we see what their proposed agenda is for the next meeting, then if there's something that we think we might want to jump in on.
Right, right. Well, one of the things that we did talk about.
It's no additional rework, it's forwarding an email, right?
No, I agree. But one of the things that we did talk about as a board, and I know Paul has left the room, is one of our missions with our boards and committees was to try to stay more on top of their work. And one of the things that we did discuss was asking them for an update during the course of the year, to Chase Point, just a 2-paragraph summary to us. I know we can read their minutes if their minutes are submitted, but that's a little bit more,
No, I'm not,
yeah.
I mean, that's incumbent upon us to go look for them and to read them
Right,
and to get
right.
updated. So I'm just saying on a proactive basis, if we set the expectation that the minutes are done, within a month or two of, we've fallen behind as well from time to time, but I don't think it's gonna be a whole lot more effort for them to just CC the town administrator or the board of selectmen or email address along with town clerk when they submit the minutes. That way we've got them, and whether we choose to read them or not is one thing,
Right.
and then we've got something to go back on, just so we can, I just don't want to get into, we've got a lot of business to take care of, and we have to kind of trust that these people are, getting done what we're set.
Right, and so the reason was that it wasn't getting done. And that really,
Right.
I mean, they're under our purview, and the work wasn't getting done.
Yeah.
The minutes aren't being updated, and we're not really just staying on top and trying to keep,
So maybe we have to go back to a
The
root
line
cause and just when we have people come on board, and I'm gonna take the bullet here myself. With the Economic Development Committee, I haven't done a good enough job with Caroline taking over as the chair. She's never been a chair of a committee before. She's volunteered to step up and be the chair, but she's never gone through any training to be on a volunteer board or committee and
right,
to, what expectations there are and that kind of thing. So
Right.
maybe
and,
there's a larger global problem that we need to fix.
right, so that is part of the welcome letter that we put together as a board. We did set those expectations. I worked with the town clerk on putting together that language. Joe and I both did.
Yeah.
So that, but maybe with Caroline taking over mid-term, so to speak, that information didn't get conveyed to her.
Didn't get transferred,
Yeah, exactly. So
That's all
that-
it is, a transfer of information, transfer of
Yeah,
knowledge.
right.
Well, and the other thing that you mentioned, that the board mentioned tonight that makes me remember another scenario was the former Assistant Town Administrator, Anthony Ansaldi, and Diane Crory had put together a training for boards and committees, which was held at the police station sometime this past summer or fall. And from the response that we received from those who were able to attend, it was very positive. I know that the Inspector General's office, who had conducted the training, would be more than happy to come back. They really liked the location. Perhaps we could try to couple that with some communication, just another piece for the board to consider as you think about how to go about getting everyone prepared. Not only is that an opportunity for a free training, it doesn't cost us in our budgetary, as it relates back to the prior item, but also perhaps accomplishes.
It's a great idea.
Jump in? Maybe we can couple that with almost like a job fair, where we have, I think when you show up at a college campus, there's all kinds of tables set up with all the different clubs that you can join and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we have we can kind of use that event.
To get people
To get-
interested, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly, to recruit as well. And just say, hey, this is what these boards and committees do. If you're interested, show up at the police station from 8 to 11 is going to be kind of this is what we do, the recruiting process, and then from 11 to 2 is the training or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if
Try
they'd
to
be, I
maximize
know
the
the last time they did it as an evening training. That's not to say they wouldn't be willing to do a daytime. I haven't asked those
Yeah,
questions.
I'm not just throwing.
Yeah.
I think that's a neat idea, because
Yeah.
I think there are people who want to get involved who they don't know the first point of contact to make, right? Something like that. Okay, now I know one person.
Right.
And then. off
Right.
they-
It's a
they
good
go.
idea.
That's neat.
And for anyone who's watching and is interested in volunteering, feel free to contact any one of us.
Right.
Mostly Nina.
Yes, I was gonna suggest that, but I didn't want to exclude you guys,
Or Select McGlavy.
because we're always looking for volunteers,
Right.
and we're at a shortage of volunteers.
Right, exactly.
All right, go into this list too, Littleton Common Committee, I thought we disbanded that one.
So that's part of Cindy's point.
Yeah, so this is the one we talked about, we had the joint meeting with the planning board.
Yeah.
We did disband it, but we renamed it the
Revitalization.
Littleton Common Revitalization Committee.
So it's not the same.
It's not the
I
same.
just want to make sure.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that when we cleaned up.
I want to interrupt for a second.
Sure.
Mr. Pickett, I'm glad you're here. Were you here for
Church Meadows.
Church Meadows? Yes. We were running way ahead of time. We already went through that, and we approved the recommendation that was put before us. So the next step is
Contracting.
contract, and Nina's going to take care of that and try to get everything back to us on the 27th for a final approval. And I want to thank you for everything you've done to make this happen.
I'll second that. I appreciate him jumping in last minute to try to help in terms of the site walk, because I needed somebody knowledgeable about the site, and much appreciate that.
Thank you for moving it forward. Appreciate it.
It took a while.
I think it was done right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will. Okay.
Sir, in the back?
Michael Zeldin, 11 Loanne Street. Just want to make a brief comment. I know you're devoted to process tonight and how to get the committees mobilized. However, I'd like to just reflect on something since, as a member of MPIC, I've had the opportunity to have a fair amount of contact with the committees, both those that are moribund as well as those that are trying to be active, as well as those that are active. It goes something like this. There are a number of functions that I'll call technical and professional. They're not, and I mean this with respect, they're not political. It is not capital P. And there's a distinction between the two. And if you want to get a model for it in the better days, you just need to look at the federal or even the state government to see this. And I think this applies very strongly to our town. What's very interesting is that when you look at something, for example, such as the area around the rail station or development around the common or any of the other activities, it has at least two major components, and one of them I'll call professional and technical. That is, it requires a certain basic knowledge and understanding of what is going on. Many of these committees are constituted and people not only don't know how to run meetings, they are not professional enough or they don't have the experience really to execute the master plan, for example, or any other policy that you may decide to implement. So let me suggest that in your effort to, as it were, reconstitute and reinvigorate the process, you might also consider how these particular committees are going to be used. They're not all advocates. They're not all going to be running for a position later. There are different ways to serve the town that don't necessarily mean that you run for an office, or you do run for an office. The point is that you have there's a fair amount of talent in this town that's lying untapped because the approach to them is mixed as opposed to being specific. We would like you to serve on this committee because of the expertise that you bring here in particular. In other words, it is almost the first thing that has to happen. The current committees, many of them, for example, the Economic Development Committee, had not been and still is not, by my measurement, been very active because of lack of attention and lack of pure professionalism. There are very few people around who've had experience in business, corporations, dealing with corporations. There are many people who are eager to have that opportunity. However, they're not approached, and when they are approached, what are they supposed to do? The division between political and professional has to be made in order for them to be clear that they're serving the town in a particular way, as opposed to the mixed bag that has been presented traditionally in towns like Littleton.
No question, though, and it's more rhetorical. In a town the size of Littleton, all of those positions necessarily encompass both the political and the technical. Furthermore, we don't necessarily have an abundance, and oftentimes we're appointing whoever shows up, regardless of technical credentials. So I don't have a solution. I'm simply throwing it out there that yours is an ideal. I think we're constrained more by the practicalities of who we have in front of us, but it's useful insight into thinking about who we need to recruit.
And we've had, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
So one of the things, and Nina and I have had these discussions about ways that we can get out into the community. I think Chuck's suggestion a few minutes ago about a job fair or a volunteer fair is really helpful. We do certainly need to do more outreach because there are a lot of people that do want to get involved. They just don't know how to get involved, and they don't know how much time commitment they can expend to be involved and what it really entails. So there's definitely room for improvement as far as that goes. But to Chase's point, it's really who comes before us and who steps up. So, I do think that we need to be more proactive, and we have talked about it. And certainly that's something that we can work on. And it's recruitment is one thing and getting people before us, but to take it to the next step, the training for the boards and committees, it's a great idea. I forgot we had done that. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
And marrying this back with what you brought forward with respect to budget orphans, right?
Right.
To have someone come forward who has tangentially relevant technical experience, but maybe not the technical experience we need, or maybe no experience serving on town boards or commissions, it really only takes a few dollars to get some people basic training
Right.
to learn how to function in that environment.
Right.
Understand what your state mandate is, or what your, how to go about executing this position. And so putting a few dollars behind that is really us putting our money where our mouth is and saying, listen, we'll help you get there.
Right.
Whoever you are, if you're interested, you want to serve, you have something to contribute.
We'll give you those
If you're
resources.
gonna invest the time, we can invest the money.
Right.
It's an investment, exactly,
Right.
not an expense, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Not to belabor the point, but again, if anyone
belabor it.
in the public is watching, I am more than happy to discuss and to tie it to the conversation we're having. I'm more than happy to discuss someone's background, experience, and what committees may be of interest to them, or they may have some knowledge on, or if someone's just generally interested to learn a little bit more about local government and participate, because to some degree, a diverse pool of individuals on any board is beneficial as well.
Right. And I think too, to that point, Nina, is people who move to Littleton from other communities really don't understand our form of government. It must, in most cases, it's very different from where they grew up and what they're familiar with, so definitely more outreach and education's important. You all right?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm not, but,
Right. Like,
You're no more broken than usual.
exactly. I do have a comment to make, but Anna just.
I was just,
Oh.
Anna Houston, 55 Jennifer Street. I was wondering what the time frame is for filling these vacancies. Do you all have a time frame?
We're meeting tomorrow. No, I'm just kidding.
Are you talking about the recent
Pub vacancies, yeah. Are you hoping to fill them before May
They're all
or?
released.
yeah.
So, George, mind if I just jump in here real quick? So I threw the idea about the job fair out there, but something I tried in my professional career, business life, was doing a virtual trade show where instead of people coming to the McCormick Center in Chicago and coming and seeing our wares, we brought our wares virtually to potential customers. And that's certainly something we could do, either doing an interview with Caroline Armstrong, the chair of the Economic Development Commission, and say, this is what we do, this is when we meet, maybe it's an interview on the Independent, maybe it's an interview on LCTV, and maybe it's an interview on LCTV that then gets streamed, and when you click on the Economic Development Commission on the website, there's a message from the chair. So, I mean, we can, just as far
That's
as,
what we do.
try to meet people wherever they are. Some
Right.
people picking up the newspaper, some people watching LCTV, and, but a lot of people are on the internet, and that, if they're looking for someplace to go to find out more about, well, where could my skills be used? Let's use the resources that we have, which really wouldn't cost us a whole lot. I mean, we have to tax Nancy with putting that stuff up there, but it just,
So maybe we can bring all these ideas together and have a further discussion on this. I think these are all great ideas.
Good idea.
Because I do have some information on this, I just don't have it in front of me, about what other communities have done.
okay.
I also wonder to some extent whether this is part of a larger discussion for goals. Certainly, we can do it mid-year, but I think we accept that we have a lot in front of us before now in May.
We do. We have a lot of vacancies. That's the problem. And in order for we
It
run
all
on
ties
volunteers.
together.
We've got our full-time employees that do a great job of doing the day-to-day stuff, but there's so much other stuff that happens based upon
Yeah.
volunteers. And
Right, absolutely.
we kind of always have to be on the recruiting.
No doubt.
Right, so I think there's a lot of good information shared here tonight, but maybe we can just pull it all together and then come back and circle back with this.
I wonder if there won't be something at the MMA meeting. too,
Right.
Because,
Yeah,
or at
that's a
least
good
colleagues
idea.
that we can.
It honestly is a very good topic for them to take up. I guess that you can submit to present at the trade, seminars at the
Can I
trade
submit
show.
Cindy?
Too late, sorry, unfortunately. But that would be a good approach.
7 a.m.
But it would be an interesting idea at this point in time, because I think a lot of cities and towns are facing vacancies on boards and
Right.
committees, and I don't think that this is unique to Littleton. So it would be an interesting seminar to have a discussion on how to recruit.
Right, and I think I've attended those forums at the MMA in the past. I can go back and check my notes on that,
Nice.
yeah. It's a good idea.
vacancies and training.
Right,
How do you bring people up to speed in
right.
municipal?
So is this another item for the January 27th agenda, or something in the future to be determined?
I would say February, sometime in February.
Yeah, after the
Yeah,
MMA.
February probably makes more sense.
Yeah.
Mr. Sanders, did you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. I just want to say that normally, you don't toot your horn that much about, what is done, but I can tell you, I watch on television and I try to get out to the meetings and so forth. There are a lot of able-bodied people in this town that is on committees, and they're doing a great job. And I am thankful when you look at the list of vacancies that you have in this town, it's not that many compared to other towns and cities. So we have a lot of people that has a lot of knowledge, that's in different areas. Sometimes they want to be on the committee, and some of them don't want to be on the committee. But I never known Littleton to turn away anybody that volunteered for a committee. So I think that what we have, we're blessed, and I think they do a good job. I think they do a great job. When you're working for nothing, sometimes people don't appreciate that. When you're giving away your time to not to be with your family, your children, what have you, sometimes people don't appreciate that. But that's the price you pay when you're a volunteer. You're going to give away so much, and your family is going to sit back and let you do that. So as a town, we're thankful for the volunteers that we have in this town. At least I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add something for the future?
Well, just if we're collecting ideas, the other one that just popped into my head.
Sure.
Mr. Sanders always gives me these pearls. When you speak, I come up with ideas and I jot them down. Recruiting at Third Thursday. I mean, it's very well attended, and there's a lot of people, and a lot of young folks as well, that, don't know what opportunities are out there. Maybe we just have a whiteboard that has a list of the vacancies, and someone might say, oh, I might be interested in the
Big blinking lights with arrows pointing. Volunteer here.
Right.
taser.
So just let me check one quick thing. From what I understand, we haven't decided any action on this other than bringing it back in February. We haven't necessarily decided to request written updates, correct?
Well, I would like to do the written updates.
Did we
I'd
finalize
like to request
that?
written updates.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Because it's going to take somebody 2 months or more to get it to us.
Right.
Between the time they are
Actually meet,
notified,
yep.
they actually meet,
Put it on an agenda.
they actually
meet,
put
yep.
it on agenda, they write it, then they approve it, that's easily 2 months for
Right.
some, in the best of circumstances. Some of these committees only meet once every month or once every 2
Right.
months.
And it's broadly just requesting an update from the board or committee?
yeah. So I have that whole list, Nina, and I have the initial letter that we sent to all the boards committees, that this can be a follow-up referencing back to that letter. And this is exclusive of the committees that we're going to invite in for our presentation.
The only
for us.
additional consideration I would ask the board to think about is some of those committees had submitted documents which we put in packets, but we never had the opportunity to discuss. So, for instance, we asked for committees to submit their goals. And in the various things that we did over the course of the end of calendar year 2019, we included their goals in our packet, but we only found time to review our own goals and set our own goals. So I don't know if we need to look back before we ask the boards and committees to provide us further input to what they actually submitted at that time, before we take that action. I don't, again, that is only if we're referencing back to that letter, because that
Right.
letter then had a subsequent correspondence from that board or committee, most likely.
I think at this point, just getting, like Chase said, a two-paragraph update of what's going on, even though we didn't get to that goal part, just so we have something from each one of
Right,
those
just an
committees.
update.
That's fine. I
Yeah.
would recommend we just
we can.
Not necessarily reference back.
But they
we
would
just-
reference back to it, because if they want to pull back to that, and they.
Yeah, so here are the
copied
goals you
herein
provided
is-
us,
yeah.
give us an update.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I
think
see
that
where
makes
you're going.
sense.
But I would recommend that those get presented to us in the mail portion of our agenda, not be an agenda item, because that way they are a public record,
Right,
and it's incumbent upon us to read them,
yeah,
not necessarily during the business hours of the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with that?
yeah, yep. Okay.
Okay, we all set with 11?
The only last question I'll ask, I just often like to have actionable items to walk away with. Am I working with Cindy on language to be sent to those committees? Is the board comfortable with Cindy and I working that out?
Very.
Yep. That's
You
fine.
betcha.
So,
Anything else we can do? Starts with
What-
a C and doesn't have a H after it, we're good, right, Chase?
I'm sorry, so I was
If the
ignoring
person
you
starts with
reading.
a C and doesn't have an H after that, we're good.
so
Cindy, boom.
to continue on number 11, subsection B, we had a joint meeting with the planning board, or a joint working group meeting with the planning board, I think it was last week. One of the things that we talked about was forming the Littleton Common Revitalization Committee. This was based on some information that had been circulated between the planning board chair and our board, just relative to the layers, the overlapping pieces, if you will, of the sewer project with respect to housing, transportation, planning, economic development. So we talked about bringing together a member from the sewer working group, the planning board, the housing trust, task, and the EDC to work together to each bring their respective wheelhouse to the group so that we can work collectively to address questions or concerns to the community outside of the purview of the sewer working group. The sewer working group is working on the mechanics of the sewer project and the sewer system, but there's so many other areas that fall outside of that that are going to require community outreach, community forums, and just the ability to be able to answer questions when they do arise. You know, with the sewer project, well, what's the impact with housing on that? Why do we need housing in Littleton? Who can answer those questions? With regard to transportation, bringing in a member from task to be able to work collectively and just so that we can all get on the same page and make sure that we're all communicating and the flow of information is getting back to all the respective boards and committees. So one of the things that we talked about was asking each one of these groups, the sewer working group, the planning board, the housing trust task, and EDC, to appoint somebody, or I forget how we were going to phrase it exactly, to the Littleton Common Revitalization Committee. So that was one thing that we discussed and wanted to bring it back to the board to get their thoughts on this idea, this concept.
In other words, we don't want sanitary engineers answering questions about how the sewer system will impact traffic flow or the assessment of properties in the common once
Right,
sewer
right.
is put in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's enough information that each respective group has, they each have their wheelhouse, is just how to bring those wheelhouse entities together to communicate, but be able to have that pool to draw on as we move forward with the sewer project. Just to be able to make sure that we get information out to the public from the correct resource to the expert, subject matter expert.
Imagine this scenario, for example, we're holding a public forum, we get a question about how is the sewer going to impact traffic in the common? I would rather have Gary LaCroix help us answer that question about what the process is for changing traffic flows if we need to, working with the state, what the Transportation Advisory Committee has discussed in that regard, the direction that we're going. I think he's a better, a more fluent expert in that than someone designing a wastewater treatment.
Right.
And similarly, you could talk about how is this going to impact zoning above ground. I would rather Anna talk about that as a member of the planning board than again, an engineer who's designing the pipes that go below ground.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to any of the volunteers on any of the committees that could potentially be the subject matter experts in those areas. We have people, professionals on staff that are truly the subject matter experts in those areas that I'd rather get those opinions from. Chris for traffic, whether it's conservation, I'd want Amy or, but
Which Chris is a member of task, so
Yeah.
those discussions are ongoing with that committee. But it's just this matter, if this committee, so to speak, chose to work, get together on a Saturday, certainly we wouldn't invite Chris to come in and participate in that update on a Saturday. We're more limited when we have a town employee involved. With something like this was part of the discussion that we had. So that's my only thought on that comment about Chris. And fully appreciate, certainly Chris is the subject matter expert on traffic, but Task has a lot of good insight, and Chris regularly attends those meetings as well.
But your point is a good one, that one of the things that we should be asking members of the Common Revitalization Committee to do is make sure to interface with their professional counterpart, right? So that one hand knows what the other hand is
and
doing.
one's not writing a check that the other one can't cash.
Right.
Right, yeah, right.
Metaphors and cliches, that's how I live.
Well, but I think it's all about the information, like, the Affordable Housing Trust, for example, Marin's on that committee. So, clearly Marin is the subject matter expert on that. But there's other members on the committee as well that have a lot of information, that are probably more engaged with the public and hearing feedback from the public and questions from the
There's
public.
value from
Both sides,
yeah.
but to Chase's point, exactly. But we're lucky that we have the different layers, like we have the boards and committees, the volunteer layer, but then we have the professional staff to back us up, so.
Yeah.
And I used to planning board, to add to the conversation, I think it's also important to note that because this type of project, like also Littleton Station, they're very big and they have a lot of components to them. And so being able to work cohesively, holistically rather than in silos is very helpful. And being able to have that committee taking a look at the issues that need to be taken to town meeting, so that we, again, are working on it holistically in timing and whatnot. And I would totally agree with the comment about our town departments. None of this could happen without our town staff, so that's a given.
I see this as a broader, not deeper, so we
Right.
look at it across as many
Yep,
silos as possible.
right. So,
Do we need a motion to
yeah, to
establish that?
establish
I would
this.
recommend that, yes. I would recommend that if the board wanted to make that motion, you could move to, for instance, establish the Littleton Common Revitalization Committee as presented. Or, if you wanted to make a modification as
Yeah, so
modified.
is that the construct that we're looking for?
So the thought process was that each of those groups represents a technical discipline,
Expertise,
if you will, that's highly relevant to revitalization of the common. And the first step in that is the sewer, right? So that we'll first ask them to essentially help support the sewer as the sewer goes through, to help answer those ancillary, very important but peripheral to the design of the sewer questions, like housing impacts, like zoning impacts, like assessments, like traffic, but not stop there, right? It grows out from there. It's the first stop is sewer.
I mean, the only light and water commissioner is potential as an ad.
Well, that's the sewer, I guess that's the sewer working group is represented in that regard. And we quite deliberately kept it smaller rather than larger, where there was overlap between different groups that may be interested. We deliberately went with a smaller number.
Yeah, I'm not saying no, I guess I'm kind of exercising the hearing it now for the first time, just gotta digest it, you
Process
know,
it.
yeah.
Sure. So so two asks. One would be, the first would be a vote to establish the Littleton Common Revitalization Committee. And then the second ask would be to ask each member of these groups to appoint somebody or assign somebody to be a member of that committee. But to take it one step further, to clarify with that request that they have, a committee appointee, but also to defer to their town employee or the subject matter expert at the next level as well.
Have any of these groups, I mean, Anna certainly has been in this conversation as a member of the planning board, so there's one member of the planning board that's aware of this.
Yeah.
Sewer working group, Chase is a member there.
But the group itself is not aware. I'm going to bring them up
So
to speed on it
I guess that's where
Thursday.
I'm at, so I'd rather us create a group tonight and basically tell them, you guys now have a seat on this and you need to send somebody. I'd rather get their buy-in ahead of time and say,
Right.
hey, this is what the objective is, do you see this as being helpful?
So I did attend a sewer committee meeting. And at that meeting, I did mention that we were going to be discussing this and coming back to the sewer working group with a proposal like this. So I have discussed that with them.
And I'm fully confident that the sewer working group as maybe not the best example, because one of our concerns broadly is that we're so focused on the design, right? The water commissioners are driving forward on the design, but we understand that every public forum we've gotten to, 20% of the questions are what we're super focused on, and 80% of the questions are on the periphery.
Right.
Really, really important questions that are on the periphery. So I expect a lot of support there.
Mr. Houston?
Well, Rob Houston, 55 Jennifer Street. To Chase's point, the one group that I'm concerned that is missing, that I know comes up at every public forum I've been at related to the sewer, is finance, money. So the one group that I see missing from here currently is FinCom. Because the revitalization of the common necessarily involves financial impacts to the town, both positive and negative.
Investments, and then what is the
Whatever,
return?
right?
Yeah.
So, it seems to me that addressing any one of these, housing, infrastructure, whatever you want to talk about through this group, without involving the people who understand the money in this town better than anybody else, I think is a potentially dangerous thing. So I would suggest maybe you consider adding a member from FinCom if you hadn't already thought about that.
Mr. Zeldin?
Yeah, Michael Zeldin, 11 Loanne Street. There's only a minor flaw in your approach, which I am extremely excited to see you're taking this in this way. And that is, most of the property in the common is owned by folks who are not residents. They are key to success. They've been waiting, some of them have been waiting to leave, and that's their investment. Some of them want to stay, and that's their investment. You want to give some thought about how you're going to, as it were, approach them as well with the various, shall we say, proposed zoning, other rules, infrastructure, where the lights are going to be, who's going to pay for it, who's going to run it. Those are the folks, that's the neighborhood. So I would suggest that when you put this group together, that you make sure you have a skill set in there that has some experience in dealing with folks who are not necessarily diehard residents of Littleton, but have an investment point of view.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we're batting 500 here. As far as Mr. Zeldin's concerns go, that's principally why the EDC is involved in that. And that goes to some of the comments I think Cindy made earlier about more effective communication with the businesses in town. And that's exactly why we put EDC up here. To Mr. Houston's points regarding the finances, I would say the sewer working group, maybe I sell what we're doing a little bit short in that we're just looking at the design, but the design is both the design and the financial model to go with it. I'm not saying we shouldn't put someone from FinCom on there, but I don't know if I was clear in that
Well, from
regard.
the sewer perspective, Rob Houston, 55 Jennifer Street, from the sewer perspective, I think you guys are nailing the finance piece of it, fine, I think, but.
But the cascading
We're talking about the
finance.
revitalization of the common, right? I mean, you might think you keep FinCom off for the sewer piece, but the next piece, where you're actually starting to construct things and, you know, I agree, you may have it partially covered up front, but I think long term, you need money people at this table. It just seems to me. Just an idea.
Right.
So, is the Board of Selectmen
Represented?
represented on that?
It depends who gets appointed from any one of these.
Well, the reason why.
Yeah, because there's overlapping roles.
Yeah,
They could be
that's exactly what I was going to
Yeah.
say, is as it relates to having the Board of Selectmen be one of the members as well. And then, depending on the sewer working group, I think those two have a big part of the money, if you will, so.
Right.
So if the board chooses to not have somebody from FinCom, again, from a size perspective, that's part of how the dollar piece of it can be met.
We'll certainly have to be careful, you know, I mean, it's, in principle, it's possible that we could have 1, 2, 3. It's
We could
possible
have
we
a-
could have 4 members of the Board of Selectmen
Right.
on there, which would not be a wise choice.
Right.
Well, and I don't think, I think you'd have to post Board of Selectmen's meetings every time if you did that.
Yeah, you're right. I
Right.
Just
don't think
so
we'd
you
want to
know.
go anywhere near
Yeah.
that.
Right. Mr. Chair, Chuck had his hand up.
Well, you were gonna,
No,
so
you can go ahead.
usually, the prefaces a very wise statement. Except in this case. Forget what note I wrote. So to Mr. Zeldin's point, those folks, so we're pulling from a very specific pool where we may not have the talent necessary to make this group as productive as possible, whereas if we had some folks in mind that had the skill set that could do this type of thing, that's done development, or, I'm just
Go ahead.
playing devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Might be an argument for 1 or 2 at-large individuals where we have a specific skill set that we're looking for, and we specifically go after somebody that has that skill set.
Do you have an example?
Well, if we're looking at revitalization of the common, we could look at somebody that's done something, West Acton, for us. We keep bringing that up when we talk about the station. There's a couple of individuals that live in town. One happens to be the building commissioner now, so I wouldn't recommend he be on the committee, but his former partner.
Maybe you get somebody from Northern Bank to jump in.
So, just to back up.
It doesn't have, and that large person doesn't necessarily have to be a resident.
Right.
I mean, this is what I mean about kind of letting this marinate and
Right. So
make sure we
really,
get it right.
so the sewer commissioners made it very clear that they're driving the initiative on the sewer project. And so this committee was really geared, in my vision, my mind, was to support the sewer commissioners in their initiative. And so say they're gonna have they're planning on scheduling public forums and public discussions about this, at least having this group in place and saying, hey, do you want members from this group to attend as well, to field other questions? Just as an example. I mean, I don't think we need to overcomplicate the group or make it too big that it then becomes counterproductive, in my mind. You know, I look at these groups that are here, that we've listed, I'm pretty confident that they can answer the needs of the community, or at least, if they can't, phone a friend and
So, yeah,
you know, I just,
I guess I don't see the need of creating another committee for the purpose of having a subject matter expert in the room for a sewer meeting or a town meeting vote, or those people are in the room.
The purpose is fundamentally to serve as a clearinghouse, so that each one of these groups is informed about what the others are doing with respect to common vitalization.
Right.
Each one of them has a particular mandate that could occur in a vacuum. And when it occurs in a vacuum, we end up with sometimes cross purposes or failed communication. It's really communication. It's about, so the Transportation Advisory Committee knows what's going on with the sewer.
Yeah, so
So that the planning board knows what the housing trust is trying to do. That's a bad example because Maren would know that, but.
I understand,
Yeah.
principally I understand what you're talking about. I'm not playing devil's advocate for devil's advocate's sake, but I would feel more comfortable moving forward with something that's fully baked, not half-baked. Because right now, we're, at least for me, it's not fully baked. It's not at a point where it's a deliverable, where I personally can see the full benefit of this group being formed tonight.
Okay,
What would fully bake?
yeah, what would,
Yeah, what additionally has to be done?
I understand the clearinghouse, you mentioned it, you said communication. And I think we need to do a better job of holding everybody accountable to be better communicators, not necessarily start another committee, which we've demonstrated based upon the slide earlier, that we've got a lot of committees, we can't fill them, we don't know what they do, we need to get updates, so we're just gonna start another committee where there's more commitments, where potentially 3 or 4 of us could end up out of the house another night of the week, and
Right.
I don't wanna set up a committee just for committee's sake.
well, it's really
I'm
to
looking
help,
at what the reward is gonna be. What's the return on investment for us creating another committee or another?
it's getting the sewer project passed at town meeting and be able to educate the public continually between now and the time that we bring it before the public to vote on. It's to have a strategic plan going forward between now and town meeting, whether it's May or whether it's October,
Okay, so now we gotta get,
to have a concerted effort to help drive this initiative, because right now, we're operating in silos, we're not communicating, we don't have a plan.
so now I'm back with Rob, we need someone from FinCom there.
I think that's a creditable idea, and I have no problem making this a 6-member group. I think smaller is better. They're not going to be taking any big binding votes.
No.
There's nothing that says there has to be an odd number
Right,
on a committee.
It's just getting everybody,
Rather than being the roadblock, it sounds like the 3 of you are prepared to do this tonight, which is, I'm not gonna die on the hill for it. I just, similar to folks not wanting to take a position on, or vote on, just seeing, I mean, this was in our packet, so yeah, I read through it, but without any context about this conversation, I wasn't able to get this level of understanding about what this is all about.
Okay.
Versus what they, we talked about CCC earlier, not wanting to vote on that. I respect that decision. By the way, Chris did reach out to me, and we can put the fence in, Chase. But I'm not gonna die on the hill. I would say that if you want to do it tonight, because the end game is for this group to be part of helping us to get sewer in the common.
right,
Which is the linchpin to economic development
Right.
and revitalization of the common.
yeah,
With the addition of FinCom, I'd be willing to vote for it.
okay.
Okay.
All
So I'm
right,
going to move that the Littleton Board of Selectmen create the Littleton Common Revitalization Committee to be comprised of 1 member from the Sewer Working Group, Planning Board, Housing Trust, Transportation Advisory Committee, EDC, and Finance Committee,
And as, with the charge as outlined
with the charges outlined on
in the
this
meeting packet.
slide
FinCom in
in
there?
the packet.
This.
Yeah, did say FinCom?
Yep,
Sorry.
second,
Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
aye.
All right.
All right.
George, you want to follow up on something?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. George Sanders, 672 Gray Road. I'm listening with a attentive ear here as to what is being said. And Nick, at the last meeting that we had, he's waiting the 45 days on the contract to get the report back because they want to put out some information to the citizens of Littleton on the drop
whatever they call that bulletin that they put out. And I think it was like the end of the month that they was going to try to see, we supposed to meet on the 16th to see if they got some information back. I think this committee, if we're talking about one of the big issues, of course, is this revitalization of the common area. Of course, the sewer seems to be the big item that they're dealing with there. I think that we ought to listen and see what the sewer commission is putting out there, because they're supposed to be doing public forums in a large setting to answer questions and so forth and feed data to the people. Chase was on the call there when we was at the last meeting there. So they're wanting to put information out so that the people will know what is truly going on. But they don't want to half do it. They want to make sure they got good information and not just running their mouth and saying this and saying that. They want to make sure what they're putting out fits into the puzzle of what they're dealing with on this smart sewer system. So I think we, as volunteers on there and et cetera, I think the input is coming in because there's a lot of good information. Chris and all the other people on there, there's a lot of good information, but they want to see where the engineers are with this before they go saying stuff to the citizen here. So I think we ought to give them a chance to see where they're going before this revitalization committee that you want to put together that jump in there and start having this and that. We need the leaders telling us which way we're going here.
Right.
So to understand that this is going to take some time to put together. That this is actually on the same timeline as that. In other words, every one of these groups has got to appoint a member to this group before anything happens, right? So, so they're really moving lockstep together here.
Right.
I will hope so.
Yeah.
Just getting back to this, considering the board has a number of members on these different groups, and the only group probably not represented here tonight is the TASC, would each member bring this back, or is the board looking for our office to prepare some correspondence to give each board member to bring back to their committee?
B.
Should we transmit it directly to the chairs of those committees, or the acting chairs of those committees?
B.
B?
Which was B?
Which was B?
Town Administrator's
Town
Office.
Administrator communicates. Sure.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Because that message is going to get out a lot quicker.
it's going to get out quicker and it's going to get out consistently. I mean, I'll carry this to the sewer working group, and,
Right.
you know, I'm sure each one of us will carry it to ours, but then
Yeah,
it's
that sounds good,
consistent.
Nina.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, it'll get out quickly. I don't know how quickly, because the list is growing tonight, but it'll get out.
use the blue.
I know, the blue's running out of ink, it's awful.
Do you want to go to the next part?
No, so I'll follow up with Chuck about the
EDC?
EDC,
Okay,
yeah, and I'm
perfect.
just gonna share this with the
Caroline.
board. This is just some information that I pulled together that might be a good,
For the EDC?
for the EDC.
Thank you.
Just something that I came up with, and I actually, reading the Littleton
The survey stuff?
Common Revitalization Roadmap and bringing into the comments that were made tonight about the business committee, the business community. I think that would be a great charge for the EDC, and I appreciate that, Caroline, you've already met and come up with some objectives, but this is just something that I wanted to just mention to the committee to consider that might really help in many respects, not only with the sewer project, it would help with housing, it would help with transportation. And I think this information is a piece to the puzzle that we're missing in some respects, and I think it would be a great way to utilize the EDC. So we can circle back and talk
Yeah,
more
let's do
about
that.
that. This is a copy for you, Joe, of what I'm giving to Chuck, and here's a copy for you, and give a copy to Nina. I apologize for not sending it out in advance. I kind of just came up with it, preparing for tonight's meeting, so.
Mike?
This is for Chase, because I think he has some idea. Assuming that the financing of the sewering system goes in, what would you, is the best estimate you would take for the the sewer system completion to the point where the other components for the common might be? Are we talking about a 5-year, 6-year, or 9-year period? Or something less than that?
Less than 5.
In other words, a year or two for the sewer, and then,
Yeah, I mean, I prefer to speak in broad ranges, but yeah, I mean, 1 to 3 years before, probably 2 to 3 years before we see sewage flowing. Hopefully we
Okay.
don't see it.
so, and I don't mean to prolong the, I'm just trying to, if you're gonna have these committees, someone has to know how long. What's the job?
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think we would be looking for an initial mandate in the range of 2 to 3 years and then see where it goes from there, right? The short-term objective is how do we move the sewer forward, but that's only the first domino that we push over. But their work, this group's work with respect to the sewer will end long before the system is actually operational, right? They will quickly move on to the above-ground stuff.
And the folks who will be moving on the above-ground stuff are the current property owners, one way or another, who have their own schedule and their own.
For sure. But also the members of this group, to the extent that their decisions are relevant to those property owners, planning board, housing trust, so on and so forth.
Okay.
What's that?
Cool.
I'm in a Board of Health, right, and I work in a sewage treatment, $109 million. The question is, who's gonna pay for this $35 million if the population, minor population will use it, but the majority will not be using it? And also the second point will be, you have to make sure that all the citizens in Littleton are aware that this particular project is gonna cost money, and who's gonna pay for it? Each individual, if somebody has a septic system and they say, I don't need it,
It's on the agenda.
you have enough customer that's gonna be able to, be able to afford to pay for this particular bill, that's $30 or $35 million?
Yep, we do, and it's not 30 to 35, but yes.
That's what they used to say, remember that.
Don't engage.
When something starts, you never know what happened later. And it's my word, because I went through something like that. So you, long time ago, you, the selectmen, told me, whoever's gonna use is gonna be able to pay for the fee. If anybody else doesn't want to have it, because the direction of the area.
Point of order. Sir, this is not on the agenda. This is not public input. This has nothing to do with the agenda.
Everybody
This
else
is-
saying
no,
something.
Sir, this is not on the agenda. You're out of order.
It's not right. I put a point of order because that is not right. Everybody should be notified in Littleton what you're doing.
Gene, I appreciate what you're saying, but it's not related to exactly what we're talking about.
I understand that, but I gave you an idea that you make sure that everybody notified. Because at the town meeting, you have, what, 800 people? I mean, 300 people, only took 300 people to get the library go to.
All right, moving on, right?
Yep.
Number 12, the letter from the town of Needham, background on it. We received this letter, which basically it says that the governor's proposing changing zoning, instead of having a 2/3 of a town vote to change zoning, it would only take 50%. Needham proposed a letter to us. They're opposed to this. They wanted, I guess, us to make a letter in their favor. We decided, I don't know, who drafted the letter?
Marion drafted it.
Yeah.
Or did you draft it?
No, Maren did.
So the letter was drafted here. If you're in favor, we want to vote for it. To me, honestly, I don't see how this makes a difference on finding affordable housing. But that's just my opinion. I mean, the thought's there, the idea's there, but
Oh, I did draft some of it.
I will go along with it, everyone else does.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Anna, can I put you on the spot as a member of the planning board? This is something that truly affects the planning board and what you guys do. So is this something you guys have discussed?
We have, and in fact, it was on our agenda at last Thursday's meeting, and based on the recommended changes proposed by Maren, the letter itself isn't completed. It needs to be finalized, I believe, by Nina, but the content of it there is exactly as the motion sits, and the planning board did approve it.
And actually, you made me look at the motion for a second. I think my motion probably should be updated to say, instead of, if the board wishes to move forward this, remove the words supporting House Bill 3507 and add, insert counterpoint to the Town of Needham's letter of October 2019 on House Bill number 3507. Because the letter.
Just regarding?
Well, the letter no longer explicitly supports House Bill number 3507. It now just simply provides a counterpoint to the letter Needham supplied. And I don't know, the last time that the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board discussed this jointly, this is just furthering, if the board wishes to move forward with this, there was discussion on the coverage area, and one suggestion that was made was to mail it out to both copies of this document, which is proposed to be sent out to the governor, the Littleton's state representative, and Littleton's senator, would also potentially go to the senators' districts and the representatives' districts. Of course, if they overlapped, we would not be sending two letters.
I'm comfortable with the letter that Marion revised. I think it reflected the comments of our joint meeting, which was that there should be an even playing field. Even towns who have met the affordable housing threshold still have difficulties with respect to affordable housing. I don't particularly personally like the reduction of the voting threshold, but I think if it is going to be reduced, it should be reduced uniformly across the Commonwealth and not just for select cities and towns. And so I think Marion did a nice job capturing that idea.
Yeah.
And I would supported putting this forward as is.
I echo those thoughts too, because I have problems reducing that threshold of getting something through, because I really don't see that as promoting any type of new housing, but I'll go with the idea that if it's going to be statewide, then it should be everybody.
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Furthermore, I think we should, I would prefer to simply send it to the magic subregion and the cities and towns within our representatives' districts, as well as the governor. I don't think it needs to go statewide. It's not worth.
Not worth the expense.
No one in Western Mass cares what we think, frankly.
I agree.
If they even know where Littleton is. So.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree.
Okay. Then move that the Board of Selectmen vote to send the letter regarding House Bill 3507 to Governor Baker, Littleton's legislative delegation, and a copy to the Magic Subregion, as well as cities and towns within Senator Eldridge and Representative Arciero's district.
Do we want to change that language just to offer a counterpoint to the Needham letter? Do we want to word it that way, or you prefer the regarding?
Ooh,
Or did you forget?
I just couldn't remember, forget the language.
And honestly, the letter's not gonna change, so it's what you're voting tonight, so unless you prefer to have that specificity.
So the motion doesn't matter, right? Okay, all right. So second,
I know she said something way smarter than regarding, and I didn't know what it was.
offer a counterpoint to the Needham letter, but no, I'll second the motion, just so as long as it's in the letter, we're good.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Anita, can you come by Anita?
Anna,
Yeah, why am I, jeez,
She's insulted. She left.
yeah, well, I don't blame her. Anita.
well, if you maybe called her by the right name, she'd be back here.
It's not the first time I called Anna Anita, actually, in a different setting, but anyway.
Problem, Nancy. Where are you now?
I call her Nina.
You said that.
All
All right,
Okay, 13, Town Administrator.
let's see if I can do this one all right.
Halftime, let's go.
I have just a number of things that I will run through. I can go through all of these, and you guys can take your votes back to back if you're so inclined, and then we can go to the ones that require discussion. For the annual town meeting timeline, I just want to draw your attention to the green that's listed, the yellow that's listed on the timeline itself, in the packet. All the yellow areas specify aspects relating to a special town meeting. I've had the opportunity to speak with you all individually and have mentioned that a special town meeting is not actually required. We have nothing in our bylaws that requires it, there's nothing in the general laws which require it, and in effect, it really makes no difference if we held a special town meeting or if we didn't hold a special town meeting. All the business that has historically been put on the special town meeting warrant can be put on the annual town meeting warrant, and it has no effect on the timing of the execution of the matter. What I'm proposing, as you all know, is to simply move forward with an annual town meeting at the 2020, in May, in 2020, so that we can streamline, have one warrant, have one discussion about the ordering of articles, and I think it will provide for some level of minor work reduction from the board's perspective, from my perspective, town clerk, finance director. From a tracking perspective, we just write annual town meeting moving forward. There's a number of benefits. They're very small and soft, but it just makes it a lot easier. We don't also have to stop town meeting at 7:30 to enter into special town meeting, go through the business of special town meeting and reconvene. I have spoken with also the moderator, the town moderator, and the town moderator has indicated that he would support whatever the board decides and agrees that no such special town meeting is really necessary. It's been a historical practice which towns continue in some cases to do. Perhaps they haven't looked at making that change. So what I would be proposing in the motion for the annual town meeting timeline, if you approve it, is that we remove the items identified in yellow, which essentially strip out the special town meeting, references to the special town meeting. Also, I'd like to call your attention to the green highlighting in the timeline. These are slightly different approaches from prior timelines. They don't actually move anything up from the perspective of boards and committees or departments that have to submit. But what they do is they either push deadlines back or request some limited information from boards and committees. There are two changes in that area. The first is that as opposed to just having a deadline for the town meeting warrant to close on March 20th, I'm proposing another deadline 1 week in advance that boards, committees, commissions, and departments submit articles in draft form. That could be just a statement that says, hey, we have an article coming to you regarding this subject. It doesn't have to be specific to the actual article and the language of that article. That provides the board and I a week's worth of additional preparation to discuss or plan special meetings if necessary, to make sure that we're prepared come March 20th when the warrant actually closes and final information is due. Happy to discuss that further. I'll just move on to the next to keep going. The last is, historically, we have posted the town meeting warrant somewhere after the March 23rd meeting, so wherever the calendar falls. It was around Tuesday, March 24th, historically. Again, the number has fluctuated over the years because of the way the calendar falls. But I'm actually proposing that we post the town meeting warrant at a much later time on Tuesday, April 7th this year, because unlike perhaps prior years, we weren't potentially considering the addition of a ballot question to be transmitted to the town clerk, which we discussed this past fall when we were discussing the library project, and the board took the approach of wanting to insert a debt exclusion ballot question on probably, I assume, my recollection was the May special town election, and in order to do so, if we had any other articles for any reason as it went through this process that were also going to be excluded, we would need to include that on, and we would want to include that in the May special election. It's going to be important for us to have enough time to modify the warrant, to note that it's subject to a debt exclusion, because the election ballot question must be transmitted to the town clerk at least 35 days prior to the election, which puts that at a discussion of the March 23rd meeting. And so these things being interrelated really would push for us to need additional time in posting the warrant. Once we post the warrant, if it's not contingent and it's done before that, some of those final decisions are made and council has an opportunity to review and finalize, we might not be able to come back from having something be contingent. So I'm proposing we push back the town meeting warrant posting, which it has no material legal effect, but it may have a resident effect in terms of when residents typically see the warrant. Of course, that doesn't affect the town meeting report in this proposed schedule. That would go to the printer on the same day we post the town meeting warrant itself, and would still be delivered as proposed and as required by our town bylaws 14 days prior to the annual town meeting. So I wanted to call out those two material changes to your attention.
Jump in. Sure. Is there any reason that we could potentially need to have a special town meeting?
Not unless the warrant closes.
On the same day?
Not unless the warrant, I don't know how best to answer this, but there's no scenario where it would materially affect what I'm proposing. And the more detailed way of saying that is, the only scenario, which is unrelated to, I think, your question, is if someone proposed an article after the town meeting warrant closed and was posted, then we'd have to, hold a special a special town meeting, if we wanted to put that article on, for instance. But
And in principle, that special town, the timeline for that would still allow us to put it in the same
Slot.
the same night.
Well, and so the next thing I was gonna say is, even if you had a special town meeting in this timeline, and you got an article after the date that town meeting warrant articles are due and are closed, you still can't put it on the special town meeting, because it's still closed.
So it's the same-
So again,
it's
it
the same
doesn't
story.
materially affect this process at all.
Right. By eliminating it now.
Right.
We could potentially still have a special town meeting that is concurrent to this meeting.
You could, you
Timelines
probably.
all work.
Sorry?
Timelines would all work as far as, if we got a citizen's petition, or if we decided we missed something, we need to get this on there.
I think the difficulty would be the town meeting report. We'd have to back up from that date. I think what you're saying is based on my example, which was if we got an article in last minute and it was beyond the proposed closure date, which is also the citizens petition deadline of March 20th, which it has been in prior years, that was the deadline essentially, give or take a day or two based on the way the calendar falls. If we were to get an article subsequent to noon on Friday, March 20th, then we would have to scramble to see if we could pull together a special town meeting for the same night. But it would be the same issue as whether we had a special town meeting that night or not. That would have been a second special town meeting, if that
So
makes
in that
sense.
scenario, we would have, and the town was having a special town meeting, we would have a town meeting and two special town meetings. So essentially, nothing has changed
Correct.
if we delete
Correct.
our
And that's-
special.
I just don't want to hamstring us.
Yeah.
And that's even if we can back into those timelines, if we receive a notice that late. Because I haven't looked at that specifically, I'm guessing we could back into those timelines if we got something on Monday, the 22nd. But, it would, based on the town's bylaw, which I understand is a result of a committee that was formed to understand town participation, so it seems like a good bylaw to establish a town meeting report. That, in many ways, really creates a lot of back-ended dates that have to be moved up and confirmed.
You've had this conversation with everybody anyway, so I think we're good, right?
So, I can skip over the motion right now, and we can come back and do all the motions later, or you want to just go through them?
Plug it out.
Okay. Ready for a
Cheers.
motion, Mr. Chairman?
Ready.
I would say, as amended, to remove special town meeting references.
Okay. So I've moved that the board vote to approve the special town meeting
I already
timeline.
have that, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just speaking to myself. I realized I already had that in my motion, so you don't have to amend the motion I've written.
Okay, cool. Then that, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the town meeting timeline as proposed without a special town meeting incorporated.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
I,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
speaking on the motion there that you just made there, I'm just telling you what I think, okay? Has nothing to do with what the town administrator was saying there, but this is what I think that the town need to be concerned with. That sewer is going to be a big item on there, and I don't know whether the town has considered having the May town meeting in a 2-day situation, because I think the problem area that we have right now, if that sewer stay up where it's at right now, the 26 million plus with the 240 or 50 properties here, they've came with a rough estimation that, you know, you're talking about $27,000 there, which is a large number there. I think that the people should be given adequate time to answer their questions, and I don't think this 4 minute plays into this, because this is a big to-do about when you start talking about the taxpayers as a whole here. And I think that it would be on the town best side if they consider giving the people adequate time to talk about, ask their questions, whatever the case may be, and let them vote intelligently, because I don't think you can run this big item before the committee, before the town meeting there, and expect this thing to pass easily with the amount of money that they're talking about right now. I just don't see it passing, because I don't think you're going to give adequate time, and if the sewer commission does not reach out to the citizen as a whole and have these public meetings and give the people the opportunity to do it, I think when it comes to the town meeting, you're going to have difficulty.
Okay, B.
This year, I understand in the past couple of years, we've instituted a contest, a photo contest for the cover of the annual report. This year, a suggestion was made that we consider memorializing and perhaps placing some level of recognition for the important event that we had back in November, the Veterans Corner project. And so there are some potential cover photos that have been circulated regarding that. There are a couple of different alternatives. If we wish to move forward with the cover having a different approach and we wanted to still move forward with the contest, we could certainly create a page that's dedicated, or we could do the back cover. So I just wanted to bring this before the board so the board had an input on what we did with the annual report cover this year. I recognize that there was a very large event, and if we wanted to change what we've done historically, that's certainly the board's prerogative.
But historically, I think we talked about this before, it hasn't always been a
Correct.
contest.
Yep.
Many things have been on the front cover going back, so I don't think I think we ought to go with this, what the suggestion was, but that's my,
I think it's a great suggestion.
I agree.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it was a good suggestion.
Does the board wish to decide on the cover photo? And who should decide on the cover photo? Because I'm seeing one head nod, shake no.
Who's decided on in the past? We haven't decided on the cover photo in the past,
We
have
had
we?
a contest, and
We had a
there was only one applicant.
Whoever
so-
won, yeah, oh.
yeah, but the board has always,
But did we always get the final say? I don't remember.
Yeah,
Okay,
So bring the photos back to the board?
yeah.
sure.
Okay, all right.
Proofs.
Proofs. Yes, okay.
With the high school picture.
Regarding the dedication, good.
You mind if I just back up real quick, just talking about town meeting and reports and all that kind of stuff? And in the past, we have had students who have drawn the cover, so I have no problem getting away from it because of the significance of Veterans Corner, but what I would like to get back back to doing is, at town meeting, having a member of the schools or the band or somebody either be playing music while people are coming in, so that, just kind of set the tone a little bit, but at least have somebody do the national anthem, whether it be an instrument or a soloist or a group. We did it a couple of years ago, and it was well-received, and I like to highlight the kids that work so hard, and I'd like to have them as part of town meeting.
It can certainly be done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of having someone sing the national anthem. I don't know that logistically we'd have the band there, but it's a little crazy and crowded anyways. But I think, and I know what you're referring to in the past, that we have had students or somebody come forward and sing the national anthem. It's been wonderful. It's a great idea.
I'm sorry. It doesn't have to be a whole, I mean, it could be somebody playing a violin, I mean.
Yeah, or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So should we ask the school department to identify a
Put it in
student?
Kelly's lap and just say, hey, listen, we want to get back to having a student or students perform the national anthem at town meeting.
Right.
Singing instrumental.
Yeah. There you go.
Just leave it up to him and Hillary Bridge or whoever is gonna, I think it's just a nice
It's a really nice
little
idea.
feather in the cap for the kid too,
Yeah, great.
Great. Okay,
Just wanted to add more in your notebook.
I'm gonna run out of space.
I know.
Regarding the dedication, I believe an email was forwarded to the board by our town clerk regarding the names of all of the Littleton residents who passed away this past calendar year. And I know that she made some recommendations for some individuals who were involved in town government and in other aspects. And I would just ask the board to consider that, because that list, and begin thinking about not only who you'd like to dedicate the annual town report to, but what we wish to cap the dedication number to. We don't need to make those decisions today, but it was suggested that we begin thinking about that.
Okay.
I don't understand why we can't just get a list of everyone who died, a list.
Instead of a
Instead of
80-page document?
The 50 pages that it was.
We can create that if you wish. I assume that the
I think it's a lot
software,
easier to go through it than
Yeah.
be flipping.
I assume it's the software that was the constraint there, but we could manually create that list if you wanted, if the board wanted that.
Well, if it comes in a spreadsheet form, I mean, there's a way to sort it, right?
It's I don't know what the software is that generates the information, but it was about a 50-page, or
Yeah,
it was probably a 109-page
I
document.
think we've bugged Diane about this in the past, and I remember the answer being something
Comes from the Secretary of
software
State.
related.
Yeah.
It's gotta be somebody smarter than me that can figure that out. Not that that's a high bar. Relative to the dedication, Mr. Glavy left me some notes, and he said that he agrees with and appreciates the dedication selections.
Does the board wish to take up that wait, it sounds like some people haven't had the opportunity to look at it, so I don't know if you're ready to take it up now.
And my only concern was I wanted to make sure Paul
Yeah, 'cause this
was
is-
good with them, but if,
He did.
Yeah, perfect.
He agrees with and
Yeah, if Paul agrees with it, then I'm fine
appreciates
with
the
it.
then I'm
dedication
good.
selections.
Yeah,
Does the board wish to take this up now, or?
sure.
You need a motion?
I'm just
Can we
saying, in the future, it'd be nice to have a list,
Right.
so we can go through and not just,
Yeah, we can manually type up a list in the future if the software can't do it.
Okay.
It's a great use
Just
of time.
hold me to that. If I don't see it come across my desk first and it comes through someone else, just send me a friendly email reminder that I was gonna create a tabulated list for you. So we should, do you want to reference the names of those that we wish to dedicate it to, or would you like to just refer back to the email by Diane Curry? Does anybody have the names in front of them? That's the only reason.
I mean, do you need a motion for it? Give me a motion for it, I've got it right in front of me.
It's not my place to dedicate a town meeting report. Yeah.
I move that the Board of Selectmen dedicate the 2019 town report to Walter Bartkus, John Hathaway, and Alfred Bud Glavy.
Second.
Motion made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Community compact grants. I had the opportunity to just mention this in passing at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting at the end when you guys were all cleaning up, but I wish to request your approval to bring a form, essentially, that departments can fill out to make proposals for the use of the community compact grants that we have allocated to the town for this year. We're allowed to select up to 2 best practice areas, and I think it would be interesting to the board to see what departments would submit. The board would retain the final decision on what best practice areas to move forward and apply for, and would also have the opportunity to look through the best practices itself and individual members to present to the board ideas. In the meantime, if I could, with your permission, solicit this idea to boards and committees, and, well, I guess I was going to go direct to town departments, more so than anything, with staff, and ask them to consider filling out or best practice area and making their greatest pitch for the board's consideration. Everybody comfortable with that?
Sure. I like that.
I like that.
The only thing I would say to you is that it doesn't need to be a huge burden on our department heads. You know, I guess what I'm expecting from them is not a polished dog and pony show, right? I want to hear their ideas, and that's what I intend to evaluate. And if it's not polished, I don't care.
Right, yeah.
Spend their time serving our community and put together a good idea.
If the board agrees, that's great, because I mean, at this point, you know, the form that I developed really is hopefully that simple, and departments aren't required to submit, they just have the opportunity to submit.
That sounds good.
Great, okay. The next item is the NEMLEC, as you mentioned, Joe, the Northeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council Interagency Municipal Aid and Assistance Agreement. Historically, the town has entered into side letters. The police chief, who I told didn't need to be here tonight unless the board had questions, is asking that we sign a new agreement with NEMLEC that no longer has side letters. Essentially, we're just cleaning it up. It was previously signed in the chief's name. I assume the prior town administrator signed, but in order for me to sign, I'm seeking your approval. It does nothing, changes nothing, other than continues to keep the NEMLEC agreement in place.
So previously, Keith never signed it. It was John
Okay.
Kelly, and then when John Kelly retired, Matt King signed just a side letter.
No, right, so it has a line
In order to
for
do
the police
accreditation-
chief.
In order to do accreditation, it requires the town administrator.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
So he's getting reaccredited. so
Yes,
he
and the
just wants to
police
make
chief
sure
is
it's
also signing, obviously.
Correct.
It was the house cleaning that he picked up on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it somehow got by last time, or maybe they've added this extra layer now. But
So I'll move that the board vote to authorize the TA to sign the Northeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council Interagency Municipal Aid Assistance Agreement.
Second.
Motion was made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
is this something I don't know, is this something you need to bring to us?
I don't have executive authority, so I can't sign these kinds of documents. Only the board has executive authority. Except this, the next one is one that we may be able to resolve for future circumstances when we revise the policy, but I'd also be asking for the board's approval to allow me to sign the state 911 grant, which the police department submitted as it does annually, this year for $37,000 plus another $10,000, as I understand it. So it would have fell below the $50,000 threshold I think we were discussing of allowing me to sign, but until we get there, I'd recommend the board move to authorize the town administrator to sign the state 911 grant.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize the TA to sign the state 911 grant.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
This is another
I
area.
think we've all read them. Do you think we need to,
Yeah, we can just,
can we just make the motion?
Please.
It's in front of us. We
Please.
very much appreciate the donations. I
Move
think
that-
from from the
Okay,
different
sorry,
charitable
didn't mean to-
foundations, the
Yeah,
Burroughs
it's
Foundation, the Cooper Foundation. Year after year, they give us all kinds of donations, and it's very much appreciated.
I'll move that the board vote to accept a $1,250 donation from the Burroughs Charitable Foundation to the COA Energy Assistance Program and a $7,500 donation from the Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Foundation to the Energy Assistance Program.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Chase, you got one last one. Assuming everyone's comfortable with the meeting minutes of December 16th and January 6th.
Aye.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of December 16, 2019 and January 6, 2020.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for watching.
Oh, wait, Paul's not, hold on. Paul's not in favor of adjourning. Always the funny guy. Party's got one, right?
Did you see his eyes?